Hey, welcome to the live stream for June 27th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar. And this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are here every single week, welcome. It's great to see you back. Grace, James, Lauren, Deborah, hello, welcome. How's everybody's week going? Andrew? Tanitria? Garima? Malta? Karen? Sheely, hello, welcome, welcome. So before I forget, we have book club tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the book that we're going to be discussing this week is my second book, which is Out of the Fog. And if you have any questions about it or just points that you want to discuss, things that you found helpful, things that you didn't find helpful, whatever you would like to discuss, we will be doing that. So Lauren says, you look happy, Dana. It's been kind of an emotional roller coaster this week, but feeling good. I always have a lot of anxiety before the live streams. So trying to do some different things. I listened to affirmations for about half an hour before and gave myself more time to just kind of settle in and get ready. And so just going to keep trying different approaches. Hopefully the anxiety will settle down. One of my authors that I really enjoy listening to, she has a podcast about writing and just kind of more of like becoming a writer. And I was shocked to hear her say the other day that she has the same thing. Like she has a tremendous amount of anxiety before she does a podcast. And I would have never guessed that in a million years. And she's been doing podcasting for like 10 years now. I mean, so it was just reassuring to realize other people struggle with it. And I think it's just kind of part of it, especially for those of us that are more introverted. Overcomer says, you always look so calm. I have to get myself to a place where I am calm before I go on. James is talking about trolls. He says, trolls beware. This is not the place for tomfoolery. He says, that's not directed at anyone. I'm just giving a warning just in case. And also, I wanted to just say real quick too, to all of the admins that are in here every single week, thank you for everything that you guys do. There's a lot of stuff I don't see in the chat, or I see like 20 minutes after it's passed. And so it's, the work that you do here is very much appreciated. Well, thank you, Stephen. He says, Dana, you and your message are totally awesome. Let it flow. And please know you help so many of us every week. Well, thank you. I try. And I have to remind myself, I think the anxiety comes from feeling like I have to, I don't know, it's the feeling of like you have to give a presentation, even though I know that it's not. And I have to remind myself, I'm like, Dana, you're here. It's a lot of the same people every single week. It's just comforting to just have a space to be able to chat about this kind of stuff. Like I don't need to put all this pressure on myself to have something that's so perfectly scripted. So it was interesting. I actually came across another YouTuber. It was in my suggested videos, and she's younger. We actually look a lot alike. It was weird. Like she could be my daughter. It was really strange. But she does like makeup, and I'd never even seen her before. It was just the fluke thing. And so she had this whole video about kind of like anxiety and depression and her struggles with becoming a full-time YouTuber. And it was interesting, and which you think, oh man, that's such like first world problem, right? Like, oh, okay, this is your job. But she was really struggling with body image and seeing herself on video. And she just was finding herself kind of shutting down and withdrawing. And it was just about her struggles with anxiety. And it was interesting. And I think it's just something that a lot of us that do YouTube or podcasts struggle with, but we just don't talk about it for whatever reason. So yeah, Deborah says it is a blessing to be able to connect with others who have gone through narcissistic abuse. Yes, I agree. It's something that I wish I would have had way back when. And I didn't even think to seek it out, but man, that was such a lonely, awful time. Like I've never, and I do okay being on my own. Like I rarely feel lonely, but that was a profoundly lonely time in my life. So Karen says, Dana, do you think the anxiety is partly due to the technology part? Technology is always so unpredictable. Uh, not, I don't want to jinx myself, but like not so much anymore. I feel like I've gotten a lot of that kind of figured out. And I try to, like in Zoom, I can start the broadcast before I go live on YouTube. So now I've been giving myself about 10 minutes to just make sure that I have the microphone right. And I checked my lighting before I went on this time. And so, and I have much better equipment than what I had 2 years ago. And, but yeah, I think maybe technology in a small way is part of it. I think it's just more kind of the feeling of everybody's watching you, like all eyes are on you when you go live. That's a little stressful, but yeah, it's good. I mean, I enjoy doing this and I enjoy providing a place for people. And so very cool, Grace. She says, Dana, I updated my Meetup account this week. I started to come out of isolation. Thanks for the suggestion. Oh, I'm so excited for you. And I really hope that you find some meetups that just really resonate with you. I will say it's such a strange and fun platform to be on because there's just such a wide range of people out there. And some of the meetups that I had joined, oh, I thought, oh, for sure, like these are going to be some of my people. And then I get there and I'm like, actually, not really. And then other meetups where I just thought, oh, that's fun. Like I'll just go check that out. But I didn't expect to really click with anybody. And those are those are all the people that I still talk to, even though none of us go to meetup groups that much anymore. So it's funny. But good for you for getting back out there. And I would encourage anybody else, if you're ready to get back out there and just start meeting people. Meetup is not a dating site. It's generally free. A lot of the meetups are very low cost. And I encourage people, join a dozen, 2 dozen meetups, as many as you possibly can that even remotely look interesting. And you don't have to go to all of the meetups that they have. But it's a great way to, if you're looking for something to do or just to kind of just expand your horizons that's a good place to go. I think what a lot of people do instead is they tend to think, oh, I'm really lonely. I'll start dating again. And then they don't have kind of that circle of support. A nice circle of support is always a really solid plan, especially before you start dating again, because it can be so volatile and if something else happens, then the weight of another rejection or another relationship ending poorly, it can be a lot to handle. So having a good circle of kind of support, like friends and supportive people around you, and having your own life and your own hobbies and all of this it's just a great way to, I think, be really loving to yourself. So, all right, let's scroll up here. Cha-cha-cha. Mickey says, I've been in a physically abusive relationship in the past, but this emotionally abusive relationship has been so much harder to heal from. I know that sounds wrong, but is there a reason for that? Well, I think in large part with emotional abuse, it tends to really slip under our radar a lot more, especially more so than physical abuse. So oftentimes people don't really realize that they're in an emotionally abusive relationship for like a while, or maybe they might not even realize it until they get out, until years later, years or decades later, and they're like, oh my goodness, that's what I went through. No wonder I feel depressed and anxious and unsettled and insecure and emotionally just devastated. So it can be hard to tell when like what we're really experiencing when we're experiencing it, because there's so much manipulation, and the grinding down it just happens so slowly and steadily for most people. And there's a lot of highs and lows. I think with physically abusive and emotionally abusive relationship, there's a lot of highs and lows where the good times tend to be really good, the bad times tend to be really bad. And so people, those are how trauma bonds are forged. It's the bad times are so painful, but then there's like the relief of the good times, and then everything is okay for a little bit, and then boom, all of a sudden, things just take a turn, and all of that back and forth, up and down kind of stuff. It's just a lot to process, and it creates what I was saying earlier. It creates these trauma bonds, and it's this intense kind of bonding to another person. It's a very strange thing that we tend to experience, and that's why a lot of people too, when they get out of these relationships, they think to themselves like I can't tell if this relationship was that bad because the good was so good, and I feel so connected to this person, and I feel like they might have been my soulmate, but I'm really confused because they were so awful to me. So like, why do I feel this way, and what do I even do with that? And so then that level of intensity, I guess that's what I'm saying, that level of intensity that we feel towards that person, it can easily be mistaken for love. And so people can feel like, I'm scared I'm never going to love like that again. But really, it's not love. It's the highs and lows of the trauma bonds. It's the anxiety of the bad times and the relief of the good times. But make no mistake, it's not love. If you think about love in terms of it really being, it's a verb, it's an action word. And loving a person, it's a consistent level of like appreciation of who they are. It's nurturing, it's supportive, it's kind of just everything good and right. Like if you love a child, if you love a friend, think about it in those kinds of terms. Love isn't, intense feelings. It's not where you feel like you want to kill yourself if the relationship's over. It's not where you're left feeling like your self-esteem is shattered. Like none of that is even in the ballpark of love, but that the chemicals are oftentimes many of the same types of chemicals that are involved in when we do feel love. And so there's just kind of that neurological component where it's confusing for us as to like what we experience and why we have a hard time kind of letting go and moving on. So let's see here. Yeah, Garima says it wasn't love for a very long time. Perhaps it was never love. And then Dandelion Green says, yes, as Dana says, self-value. That was such a game changer for me, to swap out the word love with value. I feel like I didn't understand the concept of self-love for a very long time. It just seemed kind of like a murky phrase, like just a cliche, like, okay, self-love. Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't like hate myself, but I mean, it was like, I don't like look in the mirror and think I am gorgeous. I love myself. And so I guess because I didn't have an understanding of like when people were using that phrase, what they meant, because it did feel narcissistic to be like, to go look in the mirror and be like, I love you, right? Or I love myself. But when I was able to replace that word love with value, and think, hey, I value you. Like I value myself and everything that means, like valuing your time, valuing your energy, valuing your emotions, valuing the quality relationships that you do have in your life, valuing your body, valuing your health, valuing, this is a big one, valuing yourself enough to get out of harm's way. That was another game changer, because I had this long-standing pattern of staying in situations, whether it was toxic friendships, work environments, many relationships that had been toxic for a long, long time. But I always justified things. I just, and I guess too, in large part, it was because I thought my idea of like a truly toxic person was somebody who was toxic 100% of the time. So that kind of confused me too. Like, well, we have our ups and downs, but like 80% of the time they're awesome. Like we get along great. It's just, man, that 20% is a freaking nightmare, So that was a game changer, realizing, okay, like honoring your instincts about people and situations, and not putting yourself in toxic situations, and removing yourself from toxic situations, and realizing that you matter, and that no situation is just worth your sanity or your safety. I mean, that's so huge. Because the old me was, especially with jobs, it was always about like, no, I need to, I am working here. I need to keep this job. This was years ago, 20 something years ago. I had this job with my best friend at the time, cleaning a printing company, and for her grandmother. And her grandmother had a printing company, or not a cleaning company. And the staff had upped and quit. And so she needed somebody. So she was going to pay us to do it. And it was by far like the worst job I've ever had. It was so unsafe, and it was just sketchy. There was a guy that lived in his van in the garage that was always kind of prowling around. We went there at like 10 o'clock at night. We were young, we were 19 or so. After hours, it was this big, dark building. It was dirty. It was disgusting. The guys in there, I didn't even, like, it would have never crossed my mind to be that disgusting, especially at a place that I worked, or just in general. I mean, they would blow their nose on the wall. I mean, it was just dirty, disgusting, awful, scary, creepy place. And I felt so bad quitting that place. And then I look back on that now and I'm like, oh my goodness, honey, like you should have quit that a long time ago. Like that was such a scary, gross, dirty place. So just things like that, these realizations that you have, that it's amazing. All of the realizations that we can have when we start kind of getting into the healing part of all of this. We think like, oh, it's just this relationship, this relationship, it blew my world apart, and now I'm rebuilding and things are really chaotic, and we're trying to understand narcissists or sociopaths. And then if you're in this kind of healing community long enough, people start talking, you'll start hearing about like boundaries and kind of like how to, moving forward, and like a healthy understanding of just everything, self-love and compassion and forgiveness, and like what all of that means in a healthy context. And we're going to actually be covering a lot of that tomorrow night in my book. And then you just kind of realize, oh my goodness, it's like pulling a string on a sweater. And you're like, there are so many things in my life that are related that I never realized were related before. And it's just such a game changer, such a game changer. And Dandelion says, talking about boundaries, and says that, yes, I'm feeling like I'm being unkind when setting boundaries. It's hard. Yeah. It is difficult. It's uncomfortable, but I think every change in general is uncomfortable. And I think it takes practice kind of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So One of the things I tell myself when I experience anxiety, like with doing the videos or trying to assert myself, especially, is if those feelings of anxiety come up, I tell myself, Dana, these are the feelings of you being brave. Like, you can handle this. And that helps so much, so much. So I don't know. I hope that helps somebody else out there. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Deborah says, almost 4 years after leaving my ex, I am now just finding myself again. Yeah. I think that's more normal than what people may realize, because it's not just, because here's the thing too, let's talk about healing for a second, because I know this really trips a lot of people up. It tripped me up too, is people tend to think a few things about healing. They think that healing means going back to the way that they were before, which that's not what healing is about. And so because they kind of keep waiting, like they're in this holding pattern of, well, I'm going to wait. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait to get back out into life until I feel like how I did before. And if I don't feel like the way that I did before, then that must mean that I'm not healed. I think that's probably the biggest misconception in the whole abuse community. And this is something that's not very much discussed. And I really wish I should probably do more of an effort to talk about that more, because I think that really keeps people stuck in a holding pattern. But healing is, life in general is always about growth. It's always about growth. We're continually kind of like the proverbial phoenix. We have these turning points in life, whatever it might be, good and bad, right? We might graduate from college or high school, and then we kind of rise from the ashes of that, and then we're a new person, or from an abusive relationship, or from struggling with cancer, or the death of a child, or the death of a loved one, or any number, a divorce. I mean, any type of like painful event, and we just kind of rise again. And it's like it's almost like we're a new person every 8 years, pretty much. Like, if you think about who you were 30 years ago, it's like, my goodness, I was such a different person. So life is all about growth, and growth is always about moving forward. It's never about becoming something that we once were. So that's a big part of it. A big part of healing too is in realizing, okay, I need to create like an empowering new normal, because trauma is transformative. Like, there may be some changes that you notice about yourself, and that's very normal. It's just kind of part of it. And so it takes time to kind of integrate a lot of those changes into kind of putting yourself back together again. So you might notice, like, man, you know what? I'm really jumpy. I just about start crying when somebody knocks on the door, like that. Like, for real, that's something I struggle with. I'm still incredibly jumpy in that way. It's terrible. It's awful. I don't, I wish I say this, but I don't mean it. I was going to say, I wish that I could be so quick to connect to people like the old me. But like I said, that's not true, because the old me, that wasn't healthy. Like, it was frankly a matter of time before I got taken in by a manipulator, and I guess what can get depressing about that is when you see other people. I think that's more of what it is. Like, you can see other people who are so quick to trust and take other people at face value, and who just are able to move fast, and it can make us feel even more broken. But the reality is that's just not healthy boundaries in general. And just because it hasn't blown up in their face doesn't mean that they have healthy boundaries or that they are healthy. It just means, they kind of lucked out. So, I guess in a way, I guess in a big way, I'm really glad that I am able to slow things down now and really have trust that's earned and not just so quickly given. But for many years, I felt profoundly broken because of that. And I had a lot of people around me that would say, like, oh, you just need to trust again and kind of, love like you've never been hurt. And really treated me like I was broken because I wasn't moving at breakneck speed like they were. I mean, I had a friend who was like, she, married a guy within, he was, they started dating when he was still separated. They moved really quick. They got married within a few months. And I was like, man, why can't I be like that? Why can't I just move that fast and find love and la la? But that's a terrible idea, because it's just such a crapshoot. So yeah, Wonder Panda says, no way, we'll never ever look at people the same way, and for good reason. Yes, I agree. But at the same time, I have to say, like, I feel so much more empowered now. Like, I know that I can keep myself safe. I know people are going to be people, right? So the manipulators out there, I could move really slow and they could still slide under my radar. But all I can do is the best that I can do. But if somebody starts to show that they're a dangerous person in some way, shape, or form, I know that I can distance myself. And that's very empowering. Whereas, and again, like that took me many years to come to that realization, because before I was so terrified of being hurt, but I was so terrified of being hurt because I didn't see it for what it was before. And I was allowing myself, and there's been a couple of friendships and relationships where I just allowed myself to be dragged through hell because I didn't see it for what it was. And so I was terrified to be so blindsided again. But the thing is, if you're learning about all of this and learning about manipulation and boundaries and all of this, even if you do get tangled up in it again, it's going to be significantly shorter than it was before. Like, you really do know how to keep yourself safe now, like you've learned a lot. So that's a big thing. Garima asks, why are some people's names in blue with the wrench symbol? They are the admins here. So if something happens or they need to mute somebody, or if there's a troll that comes in here, they get people out here. They keep the peace. They're peacemakers. Peaceful says, I'm reading Pete Walker's book on CPTSD right now. It's unearthing tons of memories and emotional memories. Will I ever get better? A lot of it is, that book is intense. I agree. And I think I would be surprised if anybody reads it and it doesn't drag up a bunch of stuff. It's a great book. It's really thorough, and it's an intense insight into what's going on, with us and everything else. As far as getting better, like I was saying, a lot of it's just developing a new normal and loving yourself in the process. And, some of the stuff we do have to just kind of make the best of, and we just have to live with it and learn to be patient and love. I think maybe that's the gift in the unresolved stuff, is it such an ongoing lesson in us tuning into ourselves and just being kind and compassionate and loving with things about us that aren't the way we would want them to be. So if you're finding yourself really struggling with anxiety or with, fear or what, body dysmorphia or low self-esteem or whatever, to just continually turn it back to yourself and just be like, you know what, I'm here and I still love myself regardless. And I'm going to do the best I can to work through all of this, but I'm not going to wait to live a good life. I'm going to start trying to live a good life in little way, or big and little ways, on a daily basis. That's another thing. I think people, like I was saying before, they tend to wait until they're fully healed to start living life again. And you can start now. because healing it's not an event, it's a process. And it does make such a big difference if you can get back out there and do things within kind of like a comfort zone that you might have. So if it's more comfortable for you to maybe go to a meetup or to go for a walk or whatever, just making an effort every single day to try to find some joy or peace, contentment, gratitude, positive things in your life. And I think, and it's an interesting thing that happens, because then down the road, like even 6 weeks or 6 months from now, you'll notice, like, oh my goodness, I've come such a long way. And a lot of it is doing those little things on a daily basis to bring peace and healing and happiness back into your life, instead of just kind of sitting there holding all your broken pieces, hoping for someday down the road that they'll all just come together. So I hope that sounds more encouraging and empowering, because that was definitely my intent with that. The good news is, like, you can start working towards your healing right now. And there's affirmation videos on YouTube. There's just tripling up on your self-care, doing what you need to do to really just take care of yourself is a big part. It's just a big part of healing. So, yes, Dandelion Green says, I remember reading that having a great life is the best revenge. And early on, that really kept me motivated. Yes. That was probably my biggest anchor when I was going through everything the first time. I was so angry, and I have never felt anger like that before. I did not. And I felt so incredibly victimized. It's just like, what do you do with that? It was so hard because nobody really understood. And it's not like I could press charges, and it was just so exhausting and enraging and infuriating. And so what I would try to do is, when those feelings would come up, I would try to pour that energy into something positive, anything positive. Painting my toenails, cleaning out a junk drawer, paying a bill, cleaning out the fridge, going for a walk, doing my hair. And the whole time I would just remind myself, I'm like, Dana, the best revenge is a good life. The best revenge is a good life. And if you remember, I had a Buddha board full of like sayings. I think I might even still have that. I think it's at a friend's house, full of sayings. So I made that one night out of like foam board that I got at like a craft store, and a permanent marker. And I cut that out and I put it in my sunroom so I could see it every single day, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And it helped me to steer my thinking into a positive direction, because as you know, like, your thinking is all over the place during stuff like this. And the first few months especially are really, really hard. So that really kind of kept me anchored, and it gave me a direction in which to steer. Because anger like that, it can just feel like a fire hose. Like it's just lets loose, and you're like, I don't even know what to do with it. But if you can give it an outlet and pour it into something positive, it really does help. New Chris says, I worry that revenge is the best revenge, but I still haven't totally given up on reconciliation. He's like, the stupid trauma bond. Yeah. I get it. It's hard. It's hard to kind of bring peace to that. I mean, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to fantasize about revenge. It's okay to journal about it. It's okay. But I think keep reminding yourself, like, this is not worth going to jail over, right? Like, this is not worth anything, the negative consequences that would come from it. Any victory that revenge would have would be short-lived. And it just kind of, that negativity begets more negativity. And there's so much to be said by just crowding it out with positive things in your life. is just so, so powerful. And two, like once you get out there, once you start building up a life that you love, it is significantly easier to let go of that. And those trauma bonds really do tend to break. This, to me, in my opinion, those trauma bonds are the most intense when like these relationships end and we have a void. And like, you know, the whole like universe hates a vacuum. It doesn't like a void, like it's seeking to fill it. And so if there's this huge void that's left by this person, then we're going to be thinking about them and reconciliation and all of this stuff a lot. But if you can fill that void with positive things, like, you know, getting out and meeting new people, and it just gives your brain something else to focus on, something else to do, something else that gives you pleasure other than like hyper focusing on like that toxic person, because that's only ever going to bring you pain. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to kind of go around that mountain a few times and until we realize, yep, like I keep thinking this is going to be different and it's not. And I just need like, I need to get clear on my deal breakers. So enough is enough. And I am not tempted to go back again. And speaking of doing new things, tell us about Rome. How was your trip? Okay, let me scroll up here. Cosmic says, I got out of a 10-month narcissistic relationship. I've been dealing with years of physical and emotional abuse from my mom, who moved in with a friend. Mom moved in with friend, slept with her brother, and he claimed rape, which is lie and false. Please help. That's a lot. Okay, I'm not sure if I fully understand this situation. So, okay, I get it. You had 10 months of an abusive relationship from your mother was abusive. Okay, you moved in with a friend, you slept with her brother, and he claimed rape. Oh, oh man. Did he call the police? Did anything happen with any of that? I guess I would just try to document everything on your end and be open to answering questions. And I mean, if it wasn't, then it wasn't. And it's hard because stuff like that just can create so many, like such a ripple effect, you know, people taking sides and all of this kind of stuff. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going through that. Sarah says, Dana, did you start healing after the second time, or did you already seek counseling after the first? I sought counseling after the first, but it did not help in the ways that I needed it to help. It felt good being able to vent and to be able to just talk to another person for an hour. But even though she was a domestic violence counselor, she had no clue. Like what I needed at that time was validation. And I needed somebody to, I think just kind of talk, I don't know. I guess the biggest thing that time I needed was validation and just to be heard. And she did the hearing me part, but I just felt like she thought I was crazy and making a big deal out of nothing. And it was just a really frustrating time. I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about anything. And, you know, it was just really hard. So counseling didn't do much for me. And then after the second time, so healing. So here's another thing about healing. So for me, anyhow, healing the first time I thought meant kind of getting back to some semblance of normal and not feeling emotionally devastated anymore. So, and that took a while. That probably took about probably about a year. So, I mean, the first 6 months or so, I was a hot mess. Like, it was bad. I didn't trust anybody. And friends, family, total strangers. I was just hyper vigilant. I was having awful night terrors. I just really was not functioning very well at all. And that slowly kind of just settled down in time. I still had a lot of anger. And like I said, I was trying to channel that into like positive things as much as I possibly could. I felt like reasonably healed from that in the sense that it didn't like control my life. Like I was able to more smoothly like switch gears and work and, like spend some time with friends, that kind of stuff. But the second time, well, the first time too, I thought that situation, I was like, well, I'm like, this was a hit and run. Like, that's what it felt like. I'm like, this was a hit and run. It was a fluke thing. This will never happen again. So I didn't even think I needed to do any of the work on boundaries and getting in tune with my intuition and, like understanding my vulnerabilities. I thought it was a fluke thing. I'm like, 4% of the population is like a sociopath. So the odds of this happening again are slim to none. It was just a fluke thing. And so it wasn't on my radar again. Like the only thing that I was thinking about at that time was just, how do I go about trusting people again? It never crossed my mind that I could run into somebody that was so deceptive or hurtful ever again. Like that just wasn't even on my radar. So of course, much to my surprise, when I did have that happen again, that was such an eye-opener. It didn't take me, it took another probably 6 months or so, but, and maybe more, I don't even remember. Like, I feel like that didn't take as long because I'd already been down that road before. And so it just made me really dig my heels in and just be like, oh God, I'm so glad that guy's out of my life. Like, I feel like I dodged a bullet. I really focused a lot on trying to see the positive in the situation and being like, I'm so grateful that I didn't marry this person, that I didn't have a baby with this person, like that I felt like I really narrowly escaped this stupid, crazy plan that he had. I mean, it was so, trying to focus on everything, that was okay and like workable at that point. And then it took me a couple years. Again, I still didn't realize that I needed to work on boundaries or intuition. But at that point, I couldn't deny. I'm like, man, that's really weird because those two guys had a lot in common. And that seems like it's not just a coincidence. So what's going on here? And I don't even remember like how I began piecing things together. It might have just been like randomness, like some articles on the internet that I might have seen on Facebook, or I don't remember ever like avidly searching anything out. It was around that time. I think what the catalyst was, is I somehow stumbled into a support group on Facebook. I still don't even know how, on narcissistic abuse. I'd never heard the term. I had no idea like if it even applied to me. It just sounded interesting. And at the time I was a psychiatric nurse. And so then when I got, and like within, 10 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, like everything just began making sense. And then that must've been how it happened. And then it was people like posting things in the group about other books they've read or other articles or what have you. And then it was just down this rabbit hole. So. That's, I think, I guess the whole understanding, like getting in tune with like your vulnerabilities, like your empty buckets, your vulnerabilities, your intuition, and learning to value yourself enough to where you walk away from, or you at least you distance yourself from situations that are perpetually confusing, that are crazy making, that you're sacrificing your inner peace to stay in. So that's what it was. I had started dating a guy. This was, I haven't talked about him a whole lot. I only went on a couple dates with this guy. I had zero peace about him at all. And my internal alarms were just screaming at me. And again, at the time I was like, I can't really pinpoint it. Like, I just had a really difficult time. Of course, now I can totally pinpoint, like, yeah, there was no shortage of controlling, crazy, psycho behavior. But at the time, I just didn't see it for what it was, because it was just all very kind of covert, you know? But I was like losing sleep. I was feeling really anxious. My night terrors were kicking up again. And I'd learned, like, this was now would have been the third time, right? So like the second time, that was one of my big warning signs with Steve, was those first few weeks, all of that stuff resurfaced. My night terrors just began shaking. And I was like, man, I really have issues with men and with commitment. Like, that's what I kept thinking. Cause I'm like, he's so wonderful. Like, it's gotta be me. I'm just afraid to get hurt again. And my friends were like, yeah, it's you, because he is so wonderful. But they weren't picking up on like a lot of, they didn't have all the details, right? So I glossed over a lot of red flags. And then of course that just went off the cliff, So when that kind of stuff, but I thought that was weird. I'm like, man, that's really weird that I'm experiencing these same kind of feelings again. Like, I haven't experienced them since Jack. And then when I met that third guy, fast forward 3 or so years, I was like, okay. And I was talking to a gal I worked with who was a therapist, and I was a wreck. And I was telling her, I'm like, I don't know if it's me or if it's him. And, he's not really doing anything, but I can't really tell. And like, he seems like a really great guy, and I don't want to blow it. And like, do I have issues with commitment? Like, what? I was just a wreck. And she had told me, she's like, she was like, if you ever feel like that, it's probably not a situation worth being in. And I remember kind of wanting to push back against that. Like, but how do you know? Like, how do you know for sure? How do you know? And because what if he is a really great guy and it's just my PTSD? And that was another big lesson for me, is if you're needing concrete proof that a situation is indeed a problem, then you're going to, if the only concrete proof that you're going to accept that a situation is a problem is you getting hurt, then you're waiting too long. So the old me really felt like I wasn't giving a person enough of a chance, or I was overreacting if I got out of a problematic situation in those early stages where there was perpetual confusion and mental anguish and like night terrors and stuff like that. The new me doesn't sacrifice my mental health. So if I'm feeling, emotionally just discombobulated, I've got to get away from that person. Doesn't matter if it's me, doesn't matter if it's them. I don't like feeling that way. And generally it's them, because I don't feel that way around other people. I only feel that way around people that are predatory. So lots of big lessons. It took me, like I said, a long time to connect the dots. And that's one of the goals of my channel, is I don't feel that a person needs to spend 7 years trying to connect the dots to these things. I think if you're aware of this stuff early on, it can shave years off of your learning curve. It's just that there's not that level of awareness of like what people tend to what lessons they really need to learn from this, because there's no shortage of people learning and me too, of learning all kinds of lessons that thinking that that's going to help keep them safe, but they're still not learning like the bigger picture kind of lessons. It's like people tend to think to themselves, well, I'm never going to date again, or I'm never going to date a redhead again, or I'm never going to date an attorney again, or never going to date a guy from the city again, or what have you. But it's the behavior. And until like you understand the behavior and you're not seeing it through the lens of like a profession or a gender or sexual orientation or a zodiac sign or any of that stuff, it's going to potentially happen again. So it's so important to see problematic behavior for what it is. And frankly, it'll set you free, because even though at first you're probably going to start seeing it in everybody, or at least a lot of people, It's not that you're overreacting. It's just that you're waking up to this stuff for probably the first time ever. And it's a gift, but it can also kind of feel like a curse, because other people out there, like, quote unquote, normal people, or people that have been abused but haven't learned these same lessons. Because I would have been one of those normal people too, who hadn't learned those lessons the first time around, or even the second time around. People that haven't learned these kinds of lessons they're not awake to it. They still don't fully understand it for what it is. Garmina says, being an empath should be empowering. The only weakness is accepting that you help others by giving them the benefit of the doubt, and you shouldn't. Yes. Yes, I agree. Like, being really in tune with others, and it can be a good thing and a gift, but all within the context of healthy boundaries. If we're taking action out of guilt or just sympathy, and I think so many of us, I still struggle with it, but you see somebody else that's hurting and you just don't want them to hurt. But we can be real like puppeteered by that if we don't have that under control. Bonnie says, yes, predatory people make your radar alarms go off. Yes. And it can be anybody. I mean, it can be a stranger, a person walking down the street and they're getting a little bit too close to you, or they're walking a little bit too fast. It could be, any number of things. A doctor that just kind of gives you the creeps, or a therapist that gives you the creeps, or a coworker, or that's what I'm saying, like seeing the bigger picture, because normal, decent people, we tend to think that other people tend to be like us. And especially we tend to think that people in certain professions, it's hard to see the behavior for what it is. I feel like most people, it's a lot of trial and error. It's just this waking up of like realizing, not all doctors are good. Not all therapists are good. Not all, or safe people, you know what I mean? Or not all people of the same religious faith as you are going to be safe. Like, it's just seeing the world, and it takes practice. It's just seeing the world in a very different way. It can make a person feel paranoid and hypervigilant, but you're not. It's just healthy boundaries. And it's just a healthy degree of skepticism of like, I don't know, like that guy is walking pretty fast behind me. I'm not okay with that. And so I'm going to cross the street, or I'm going to pull out my phone and just kind of try to get, to a public place or whatever. Like, I'm going to take a different action, instead of thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be judgmental, or I don't want to offend him, or what have you. Like, you just need to err on the side of caution. But that kind of stuff, it does take practice. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Jennifer says, does anyone else have that thing where you don't know if what you're feeling is intuition or if it's just yourself overreacting? So then you feel like you need to give someone a fair chance because it's not like they're the one that hurt you. It's such a common thing. Yes, yes. And when people talk about, are they ready? How do you know when you're ready to date again? And I think one of my top answers to that is you've got to be able to trust yourself at a minimum to be able to keep yourself safe. So it takes a little while to kind of get your sea legs with getting in tune with like your instincts and your emotions, and not doubting yourself, because it really creates like a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance, especially if the other person's really attractive or funny or intelligent, or you have a lot in common and like you really want it to work, but your intuition is screaming at you. It can be easy for us to tell ourselves like, oh, it's just me. So like I said, this kind of stuff takes practice, but realizing, all any of us can do is to go slow. And then if a person starts kind of showing some stuff that's not okay, we either need to address it or we need to move on. So you're not going to know with 100% certainty every single time when you first meet somebody. Like sometimes that's why giving a person's, actions time to surface is so huge. because most people that have a reasonable degree of like intelligence or even emotional intelligence know to be on their best behavior. I mean, like most problematic people out there, like don't tend to come across as a totally ridiculous person right out of the gate. They tend to that stuff tends to start in once they're comfortable, really, is what it is. So, just going slow. But yeah, if something feels like it's off, that's a big sign to back things up emotionally and physically, and so you can see things clearly. And realizing too that you don't owe anybody a chance. It's about like you being discerning and trying to figure out, like, is this the kind of person that I want in my life? And I need peace in my life. And so if I don't have peace in my life, then, that situation is not going to work. But just going slow. And then also I would encourage you to think about how you tend to feel around other people. So, odds are you don't feel like your intuition's not screaming at you when you're around friends or when you're around certain coworkers. When you're around emotionally safe people, they feel emotionally safe. And that can be kind of a hard thing to really like embrace and to fully accept. Except I just would encourage you try to notice that more. Like when you're around people that you feel emotionally safe with, notice how you feel. Like you feel calm, you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed, you're enjoying, you're not caught up in like introspection, kind of second guessing their behavior. Odds are you're just having a good time. Doing whatever, hanging out on the couch, watching a movie, going out, watching a movie, going out and having a drink, dinner or whatever. Like your focus isn't on them and their behavior and trying to figure that out. You're just focusing on the moment and like what you guys are doing together. This is very different when you're with an emotionally unsafe person where there's highs and lows. You're like, I'm not really sure if I feel comfortable opening up to this person. And they don't even have to, and when I say emotionally unsafe, like they don't even need to be a predator. They could just be somebody that you don't know that well. If you're out on a second date with somebody and they're asking you deeply personal questions, like how many people have you slept with? And, like that kind of stuff. And you're like, wait, what? Like, that's a little much. Or they're giving you pet names like, hey, hon, hey, babe. Or they're kind of talking about, the conversation just kind of goes off and starts talking about sex or things that seem like a little bit too much too soon. They're not emotionally safe because you don't know them. And again, that goes back to like the rest of the world might be everybody's hopping in bed on the first date and think people are moving really, really quick. That's kind of the new normal these days. It's a terrible idea because nobody knows who these people are, and just because they're good looking or you have a connection with them doesn't mean that they're a good fit for you. So I guess don't try to rush yourself into like opening up in some way, shape or form to a person like that you don't trust, that you don't know. Because yeah, of course you don't feel comfortable around them because you don't know them. This stuff just takes time. Yeah, Grima says, yeah, my first red flag was super fast dating and then jetting, from dating to proposal within 2 months. Yeah. And that's the thing, like to the person on the other end of it, it can seem so romantic. It's like, man, the fish are just jumping in the boat. Like this person is so interested in me and this is so flattering. And they just seem to love so quickly and deeply. And maybe we even almost envy that. Like, boy, I wish I just knew with absolute certainty that a person or a situation was right for me. What's wrong with me? Why do I have all these reservations and that was my situation with Steve. Like we moved crazy fast and I had reservations about it the whole time, but he was, seemingly just this amazing guy that I really felt like, oh, I just have reservations because of everything that happened with Jack. And that was not the case. So, yeah, the thing, people who value themselves, okay, they understand also, like they value their space, they value their time, they value their lives. They are not quick to let other people into that. And they're very discerning to see, like, is this person going to be a good fit for me? Because they know, they have that foresight of realizing, okay, yeah, every relationship feels good for like the first 90 days. Everybody's the dopamine and the oxytocin. It's just that it's the lust and the infatuation of it all. Like, that's how most relationships start out. So they don't get caught up in that. They see it for what it is. And then the other people, especially, that was my thing with both Jack and Steve. I'm like, y'all are like in your 40s and you're acting like high schoolers, moving so quick to profess your love. Like, you don't know me. And that was really off-putting. So now I really truly see it for what it is. It's like, if a person is so quick to profess their love after a month or two, it's like, then love must not mean very much to you in order to just be so quick to want to combine your life with somebody else and to use such strong words for things, So that was another really big lesson. Yeah. Wonder says, yes, it is super off-putting. And honestly, for me, that I would say would be a deal breaker, because it just shows a lack of emotional maturity. Like, even if they really mean it, they're like, I'm so in love with you, and it's been like 3 weeks in, or 2 months even. It's like, you love who you think I am. Like, you don't still know me. Let's have this conversation again after you've seen me sick. You've seen some life stuff happen. Like, it's so easy to think that we love another person when we haven't seen them go through anything stressful. They haven't been sick. They haven't, you just got to see a person through a few seasons in life to see how they really are and how they handle things. JJ says, I married a total stranger that love bombed me to win me from someone else. Once they won me, the game completely changed from love bomb to totally rude sarcasm and criticism of me and my family. Ugh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's very common, because it's just all a game. Whether or not the game is intentional or unintentional, I don't know. I think we don't even need to find out, right? It's just the fact that level, you're dealing with a person who just has the emotional awareness and kind of abilities of a child. Like, they're just not fully formed for whatever reason. And, so yeah, but that's really common. And then I think another thing that a lot of people struggle with is if they're mistaking that love bombing as sincere. That stuff, man, that can feel so amazing to be the target of love bombing. It makes us feel really important, really loved, really just appreciated and seen. And it can just really bring a person up to like these high highs where we're like, man, this is what love should feel like. Cause it's like something straight out of a movie, And then when that goes away, it's really hard people are in a scramble to get it back, for sure. But then it's also, people will oftentimes compare other relationships to that, because they're like, man, they're somewhere stuck between, like, I want to feel loved like that again, and I'm terrified of ever being hurt like that again. But if you can understand what love bombing is, and that it's not real, that it's just the signs of it's either a signs of a con artist or a really deeply emotionally immature person, that it's not healthy, that real life doesn't go like that. It's just too much too soon, and to slow down, then it kind of loses that hold of thinking like, I want to find somebody else like that, because that can be really dangerous thinking. Okay, let me scroll up here. Let's see. Cha. Yes, Leslie says, I started to see love bombing as overacting. Yeah, especially if it's coming from an insincere place. It tends to come from either a place of insincerity or a place of immaturity. Either way, you can tend to spot it for what it is. I think that was the guy number 3 in my life. It was insincere, and I had encountered like flashes of that with both Jack and Steve, and I'd never encountered that with any other person that I can think of. Maybe like like a small child that was just trying to guilt me into something. And so then that was one of the mini signs with that guy. Was this one time he was over at my house, we were having a conversation about something, and he starts fake crying, telling me like how much I mean to him. And it was the wildest thing. And I didn't even know what to do, because I was just like, does this guy really think that I'm buying this? Like, it's very obvious that he's not crying. Does he think I'm stupid? Like, it just was so confusing and weird. But at the time I was like, I mean, there were so many red flags with him. I just didn't see them. I just thought it was a bunch of just strange behavior. It didn't strike me as like enough to be a red flag. The new me realizes that's enough. Any one of those things is enough to be a red flag and a deal breaker. Sarah asks, how can we tell if a slow-paced person is honest and not just a secretive narcissist? Okay, that's a great question. Generally, most predatorial kind of people, either it's intentional or it's more like, I say unintentional, but they know what they're doing. It's just deep in their subconscious. Like, they feel entitled to do what they do, I guess I should say. They might not have like malicious intent, but either way you lose, right? If a con artist of any kind or a manipulator is playing the long game with you, generally their behavior, you will see enough problematic things surface, especially within those first like 30 to 60 days, like knowing what you know now, not knowing what you knew then, like seriously knowing what you know now. Like, go back and look at those situations, and odds are there were things that were strange to you that you glossed over because it felt like you're making too big of a deal out of nothing. So like I said, that with that third guy, fake crying, that's really weird. So he also was very controlling. He wanted me to call him every single time I left work at a certain time. He wanted me to call him before I went to bed. He would get upset with me if I didn't. That's ridiculous. He wanted to talk before I went to work. It felt like a boa constrictor just wrapping itself around me. And just, he set the pace with that. I mean, and I willingly went along with it. So there's just so many lessons on people moving fast, people, just things that don't add up. Like, another thing with that third guy is he was supposedly like this super successful guy. And I don't care either way, but little things didn't add up. And so like I shouldn't even like, he had portrayed himself as just super successful. Right. And so when I first met him, like, things didn't add up. Like, he drove a really old car. We had stopped for gas and he bought half a tank of gas. Just little things like that. His coat didn't fit him. It was sort of like he had some money at some point, but then didn't have any anymore, which again, I don't really care. It was just inconsistencies, I guess is what I'm saying. That made me think, like, I feel like he's hiding stuff from me or not being totally honest about himself. And honestly, like, it's like I said, it's not even about the money thing. It's about a person being able to own their truth and just kind of walking in their authenticity. Another thing, our first date, he showed up way overdressed. It was a coffee date. He showed up with this like long black ankle length wool coat on and a button down shirt with cufflinks. And he works from home. Like, it was just so over the top. Everything about him was so over the top. It was just really strange. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you can move up your line in the sand for like what you're like, what's a problem, that'll just change everything. And here's the deal too. Even let's say you meet a really wonderful, sincere person who is amazing and they are who they are, people can still change throughout their life. So that person, this is why it's so important for you to get in tune with like what your deal breakers are. I mean, they could end up becoming an alcoholic or a drug addict or a hoarder or, any number of things. And so this is what I'm saying. So we have to continually reevaluate these relationships and think like, is this still a healthy situation for me? And if it's not healthy, kind of what would need to happen in order for it to become healthy? And is this still kind of like making sure that you have that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with that other person? Like, is that still there? And if something does happen where they do start becoming an alcoholic or, they're a compulsive gambler or they're spending too much or they're opening up credit cards you don't know about or any number of things, to think about ahead of time, where is your line in the sand with this kind of stuff? How long are you going to be willing to spend time and energy and emotion in this relationship with a person that has this kind of behavior? It doesn't mean that they're bad or, what have you, but there has to be a point where we're like, you know what, I'm done being dragged through hell. Like, I want to date another person who is healthy, that we can have expectations of each other. Of here's the deal. Like, I love you and I want to be with you, but not to the point where I'm going to be destroying myself to save you or to save the relationship. So like, these are my expectations. Like, I expect that you're not going to open up credit cards in a joint account that I don't know about, or that you're going to take, I'm not going to tolerate being with the person who's incredibly messy or who's a hoarder, or if you develop, alcoholism or a drug addiction, I expect you to be able to go and get help and to get that resolved. I'm not going to stay with somebody for years upon end and it just destroys me because of the addiction. It's just stuff that that's not workable. So people need to get that stuff figured out because it's so destructive. Peaceful. That's a great question. It says, how long before you found healthy relationships again? I will answer that in just a second. Let me get the question before you, because I think that's a good point. Stainless makes the comment, says, I've noticed being post-narcissistic that if a person continues to bring the conversation back to themselves, they are problematic. Watch actions, not words. Yeah, I think it's important to have a person who is emotionally available and that they're interested in you. They ask you, how is your day? What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? There's an interest in you. And I think kind of conversation skills in general about things like that, it's just kind of hard to find people to click with. And let me talk about the flip side of that. Actually, there's two flip sides real quick that I want to talk about. The other side would be also beware of the person who listens intently and wants to know everything about you, because they're also problematic. So when I talk about you setting the pace, so I'm sorry, it's so hot in here. It's so humid and my hair is I feel like it's just growing. It's like sticking to my neck and poofing out. If somebody is taking this deep interest in you, this is where boundaries come from and are involved, and you setting the pace. So you don't have to answer questions that you're not okay with. And again, a lot of this stuff just takes practice. But it's okay to say no. It's okay to not answer a bunch of questions. It's okay and probably healthy to not be talking to somebody on the phone like every single day, all day long, to not be texting them. And again, like the topics of conversation, to just be aware of that. At a minimum, I think be aware of even though, I think for a lot of us, again, we tend to think that other people are like us. And we might even think, hey, I'm an open book. Like, I have no secrets. I have no problem with any part of my past, or, I'm totally open to talking about sex and previous relationships and whatnot. But if you're in a context with somebody, with a total stranger, that you're trying to have a relationship with, think about the tone that you're setting. So even though to you, you're like, I have no problem with this, I'm totally open, talking about all my credit card debt and my divorce and how many partners I've been with and all of that stuff. Like, just realize that's the tone. Same thing, even like meeting people, like them, if somebody's continually, you're having to go to them, especially like the first date. I'm a big fan of meet for coffee, not go to somebody's house, not have them go to your house, like public place, even if you know them, even if they're a friend of a friend, because it sets the tone that, hey, it sets the tone of, I'm looking for sex, and you don't have to make an effort, especially women. Like, that's the tone that it sets. So just be aware of that. Even though that might not be your intention, tone is a lot. And then a lot of people are upset when all of a sudden this person starts getting more and more sexual. And it's like, okay, if you back it up a little bit, they were wanting you to come over to their house. There's just no effort being made to properly date you, to show interest in you. And if, they're wanting to hang out, like last minute notice, that kind of, and if we're quick to jump for that, again, it just sets the precedent of like, yeah, I've got no life and I can be at your beck and call, and sure, you can come over here or I can go over there, but don't confuse that for something being more serious than it is, because there's just because you might feel like you've got great chemistry with somebody doesn't mean that they're looking for a relationship. So, and then, okay, so the other part of that, with people talking about themselves, is it's very common for a lot of people that have been traumatized to need to talk about it. And so when people tend to start dating again, if they haven't really, and man, I tell you, going through these relationships, it's just like, you got to get that poison out of your stomach, and people tend to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it to anybody that'll listen. And this is not stuff. This is really delicate stuff, and not stuff that you can trust with just anybody. So you need to know them for a while. And again, like, even though you might think I've got nothing to hide, I'm not ashamed, it's not my shame to carry, like, you set the pace with this kind of stuff. Your deepest, darkest pain and your secrets, those matter. And it sets to other people, if we're like just kind of verbally vomiting up at things that maybe they've asked, maybe they haven't even asked, and we're just talking all about our ex or what have you, it sets the tone of like poor boundaries. And to the wrong people, it sets the tone of, this person's an easy target, because they know exactly they know to turn themselves into somebody that's the opposite of your ex. So, and I think when you have overshared based on how you feel. If you go leaving a situation, whatever it is, at work, with friends, on a date or something, if you leave feeling almost sick to your stomach, like, oh my God, like, I really shouldn't have said that, you've said more than you're comfortable saying. So kind of like learn from that and then rein it in for the next time. Okay. Peaceful says, how long before you found a healthy relationship again? it took me a lot of trial and error. I mean, it's learning new skills. So, and it wasn't just with dating, it was with everybody in my life, although I didn't realize that at the time. And because none of it was like crazy awful. I mean, I hadn't had a crazy awful ending of something for a handful of years, but I had a bunch of like unequal, I should say, like unequal or like concerning or just kind of confusing friendships with a handful of people. And so I don't talk to any of those people anymore, but it was just a lot of trial and error. And maybe those relationships wouldn't have gone south had I been more assertive and had I had better boundaries. I don't know. Maybe not. But it was like, I don't know. I just had a lot of stuff from like I had to learn with how to relate to people in a healthier way. And even though I'm being a total open book here, I'm not like this in my real life with people I don't know. Like it takes a while. Now it does. It takes a while for me to open up. Back then, I was like way poor boundaries, like super open book right away to anybody. I would answer any single question because I'm like, I have no problem being, like this is my truth. And, if you ask, I'll tell you. But now I see, okay, that's the issue. Also back then I was very driven, and I still am, but not to the extent that I was. Very kind of like knee-jerk reaction. If somebody else was in pain of any kind, like they needed a place to stay, they needed money, they needed like whatever they needed, it was like this knee-jerk reaction of I'll help. And then I would oftentimes like extend myself and put myself in a bad situation or an awkward situation because I was trying to help them, but then there was like no boundaries around it. And then I was like, things were great for a while. And then I would start to kind of get resentful because I'm like, okay, I told this person like they could move in with me because they needed a place, but now, okay, it's going on. It's been several months or it's been a year. Like, when are they going to move out? And then, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know, like there were a lot of lessons I had to learn. So I guess the answer is like a handful of years. And it didn't just start with men, I guess would be the bigger thing. It was with friendships in even like acquaintance level and coworkers and everything. Like all of my dynamics with people are just so different now. Yeah. Salon says, I would suffer a lot of compassion fatigue because I had no healthy boundaries with being an empath. Totally. I felt exactly the same way. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, Bonnie says oversharing is like putting chum in the water to attract a narcissistic shark. It absolutely is. Oh my God. It really, really is. And then that's just, rubbing salt in the wound if we do end up, that shark does come out, Okay, let's see. Scrolling up here. C. Finn says, are there in-between stages before dating again? I can't even imagine dating yet. Yeah, I think depending on where you live, this is why I'm such a big fan of meetup.com. It's a great way, because here's the thing, like it's great if you work with people that you like, but there can also be a line with that where it can be dicey to just become real chummy with people. And then you're going out every weekend, and then just things can take a turn. It's just kind of a good idea to keep things friendly at work, but not like overly friendly. So that can be hard if a person's rebuilding their life and they're like, okay, I'm not dating anybody. And I just basically go to work and then I go home and I don't really know a lot of people. And my friends are all got their own stuff going on, or they're married, or maybe I don't have friends anymore because of everything that I've been through. And meetup.com, I just I just love it because it's a great way to get out there and you can meet new people, men and women, which I think is also good because a lot of people tend either gender, like guys will be like, they might have, well, I don't know, I guess depending on sexual orientation too, like, okay, I'm done with men or I'm done with women. Women are the same way. I'm done with men, I'm done with women. And however they go, they tend to just kind of swear off that whole gender, but then they don't know how to meet, like, they don't know how to like interact with people or how to find new people without dating. So Meetup is great because it's a wide range of people, and it tends to be around, meetups are based around hopefully interests that you have, like photography or cooking or, going to the dog park or camping or whatever. So you just meet a wide mix of people. And I think that in itself can be a great place to kind of observe other people and to practice these skills with boundary setting and being assertive and setting the tone and setting the pace and realizing that you are in control, like you can do this. And if a person just doesn't sit right with you, it's in a fairly emotionally safe place because they're a total stranger. So you're not like emotionally invested in them. And you can start watching this stuff on yourself as it surfaces. You're like, how am I feeling? Am I feeling like, oh, this person's really giving me the creeps, or boy, like that guy's giving me the creeps and this lady is annoying as all get out, but I don't want to be mean. So I'm just going to stay sitting here. Like you can watch this stuff surface inside of you. And then you can maybe on your drive home, think about it or journal about it when you get home and kind of examine how do you feel when people are being people, right? And they're pushing your boundaries, or they're just whatever, they're being themselves. And then you can also notice, how do you feel around certain other people in the group? Like, do you feel more, kind of even keel? So I think there's a lot of kind of, it can be a great tool for like self-awareness and practicing a lot of this stuff. And it can also be a really great way to meet some really cool people and to do some fun things. And I think a lot of people that go to meetup groups tend to be in some sort of transitional state in their life, whether they're new to town, they're recently divorced, they just had a baby, kind of what have you. So it can be a great way to get out there and meet people that are single. Some of them are married. I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's the public, right? But most of them are there because they want to get out there and meet new people and, cultivate some more hobbies. So I'm a bigger fan of meeting people through meetup.com than I am dating sites, if you are looking to date anyhow. Okay, let's see here. Oh, look, I see. Excuse me. Cha-cha-cha. I agree. Elizabeth says a lot of people are toxic at some level and don't even have a clue. Those who know that they're toxic, and then, those who know that are toxic and hide behind the facade are even worse. I agree. There's just such a mixed bag of people out there. And, I know we've talked about this before, but I feel like it's worth repeating. That was another big aha moment for me. And I think for a lot of people is when they get out of these relationships and they're waking up to it all. And they find out about the terms like narcissist and sociopath and emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse. And they're like, oh my God, that's me. That's what happened to me. And they start really like pouring themselves into understanding narcissism. That tends to be like the main entry point for most people. And understandably so, because that's what caused us the most amount of pain, right? So, but then they start carving up the world in terms of like narcissists and like normal people. And then it's just kind of this evolution, like there's this wake up to just seeing the world in a different way and like seeing problematic behavior in a whole new way. And so then at first people are like, oh my goodness, there's so many narcissists out there. Like what is going on? And, odds are they've always been out there. You just have never noticed it like you are now because you're just more sensitive to it. You're just awake to it. So a big aha thing for me was realizing, it's not just narcissists and normal people. There's that third type of person, which is a healthy person. And I really strongly believe that healthy people only get that way after they've been through the fire. I think you have to go through that fire and come out a phoenix. I don't think that just a good childhood inoculates a person from, it doesn't somehow magically give a person good boundaries and standards and deal breakers. Like that stuff has to be taught and explained to a person of this is what this is. Having a healthy home and growing up in an amazing childhood might set a person up for better self-esteem and these kinds of things. But unless that conversation about valuing yourself and deal breakers and all of that, it's not healthy. It's not problematic yet, but it's not healthy. And that's like the big hurdle, I think, for normal people, because and we'll talk about this more tomorrow in the book club, but my second book is all about that. It's these commonly confused concepts that it's, well-intended bad advice about forgiveness, about compassion, about family, about commitment, all of this stuff. It's great advice, but only within certain contexts. If you've got a pathological person in the mix, believing commitment is forever, that's really dysfunctional, right? So kind of separating out all of this like well-intended, or I guess putting this well-intended bad advice into more context. That was the goal of my book, the Out of the Fog book. Because you can tell who's normal and who's healthy by kind of having these conversations. That's the thing we were talking about earlier about how can you tell if they're just the narcissist playing the long game? You can tell. You'll get to that place where you can tell by people's conversations and just their outlook on the world. I mean, a narcissist can try to put on a mask of charm and this kind of stuff, but once you're just super in tune with like yourself and like the way things feel and the way that it feels when you're being lied to and the way insincere people feel in general, and you're okay with walking away from that situation, you'll be fine. Like it just takes practice though. But yeah, there's lots of, that's what's so scary is I think that well-intended bad advice can really keep a lot of people stuck. I saw this when I was working at a domestic violence shelter all the time. And it was just a bunch of people there was a church a few doors down from us. And so we had a lot of women, understandably so, who were really, vulnerable and scared and lost. And, church can really be a place of comfort for people that are hurt. And so they would go there often. And I mean, it was just, we had many conversations with them about trying to get them to understand that like abuse is not a relationship problem, that finding God is not going to help, that it's a deeply pathological behavioral thing. Even if that abusive person were to find God tonight, it's still going to take them a while to like have their behavior changed. And that's even if they're sincere. And most of the time they're not, they're just saying things. That's what's so frustrating to me is normal people just don't understand when they're being lied to, and they don't understand when they're being manipulated. I feel like if you guys ever saw that movie, The Invention of Lying, and it was like this one guy realized that he could lie. I like vaguely remember the movie, but like other people didn't lie, and like he was awake to it. And I kind of feel, not that I'm lying, but like that I'm awake to it, you know? And it's just so frustrating because you've got all these people around here that just, it would never cross their mind to lie, and trying to get them to understand of like, yes, I know he said he was sorry. He said a lot of things, like they lie. You know, it's just like you're talking to people. It's just not even on their radar of possibility. It's difficult to get people to see this and to not have them think that you're paranoid or hypervigilant or have issues. Or that took me a long time to like let go of that. Like, you're going to think whatever you think, but I'm telling you, like, I know what I'm talking about. You're just because you haven't been in a relationship with an abusive person doesn't mean that you're healthy. It's just, you just haven't been a target yet. Okay. Let's scroll up. You know, what was I going to say? Here's the other thing. Yes, here's the other thing about manipulation and stuff like that is we can talk, or there's something that I want you guys to be aware of. You know, we talk a lot about different tactics that they might use, and like the love bombing or things happen this way or that way. Something else that a lot of people do get caught up in is, and it's normal, again, it's normal for people to, when you're starting to try to understand the world around you, to start putting things in categories of very kind of black or white, good or bad kind of categories. And another way that we tend to do that is with behavior. So people think, oh, all narcissists love bomb. But the problem with that black and white thinking is it leads to a false conclusion, because you could have a narcissist who doesn't love bomb, or who doesn't love bomb like your ex, but that doesn't mean that they're not a narcissist. And it for sure doesn't mean that they're not problematic. So even though we talk about like these different terms and these different concepts, it's important that you see kind of the bigger picture. It's sort of like with the child, you know, if we're talking to children about stranger danger, right? And we're like, okay, you need to avoid the creepy dude that's, you know, that drives the van with no windows. And you know, if anybody gives you, if somebody tries to give you, a stranger tries to give you candy and wants you to go with them, you don't do that, right? You scream and you run. But the problem is, what if it's not a creepy guy? What if it's a woman? What if it's not candy? What if it's a puppy? What if it's not a strange woman? What if it's a family member? Or what if it's a spiritual leader or their teacher? And what if it's not a puppy? What if it's, or your boss, right? Like, what if it's the threatening your job, or, you know, like threatening to kick you out if you don't do something for them, or what have you. So there's just all these different ways that this stuff can go down. So this is why it's so important that you really tune in to understanding like how problematic stuff feels. There's just, and it does take practice, but you can get to that place. And it's very empowering once you kind of get over the fear of like, what if I'm overreacting, or what if they think I'm mean? And if you can just take action and just distance yourself and just realize it doesn't matter what they think. Like, say they think they're overreacting or I'm being mean, like, okay, whatever. Like, I need to do what I need to do. So Bonnie says, I only recently understand now the meaning of black and white thinking. Yeah. It took me a long time to understand that. Understand that too. But it's interesting. I think that there's so many, like, I call them like minesweeper moments. If you remember that old computer game where, when you're first kind of getting into it and like you're clicking around and like you would hit a blank space and it would just boom, like just open up this big chunk of cubes. There's certain, I feel like, aha moments in this learning curve that, even though I share my own personal experience, I feel like these are lessons that I have yet to come across a person who didn't need to learn the same thing. So, and they tend to be major game changers. It's just those minesweeper moments where you're like, oh boy, that just cleared out a ton of area. Like I am way ahead now. And kind of understanding how we might have been compartmentalizing the world and thinking about people in ways like this type of person is safe, this type of person is dangerous, ways that we might not have ever even realized before. And that's really an aha thing. And this is another thing, like if you're dating, predators know this. They know if they can, and Craigslist scammers do too, that there's certain professions, especially, that people tend to associate trust with. It's immediate trust. A person saying that they're a police officer or that they're military or that they're a wealthy entrepreneur or that they're a missionary. That'd probably be another good one. Or that they're the same faith as you. And people are very quick to just be like, oh, this is so, and then if they have that plus charm, plus good looks, oh my goodness, they're going to rope in all kinds of people. So it's, I'm sure I've told the story in here before, but so it's years ago when I was working at a domestic violence shelter, we had one woman in there who was from Mexico. I was working in New Mexico. So she was from Mexico, had met a guy through a Catholic Singles, like a dating website, and, had sold her this dream. He was this wonderful Catholic man, had the same faith, blah, 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 gets her over here and basically ropes her into sex trafficking. And it took her a long time to get out of it. It was horrible. So this is, when I talk about, like, you've got, just please be so careful, and just, especially with online stuff, go slow. And the more time we invest with the person, and especially if we haven't met them and we're texting them, and even if we're Skyping with them and we're talking on the phone, and we seem to have this amazing connection, it is so easy for us to really develop these deep emotional ties to this person that may or may not be a good thing. So, really meeting that person and just going slow there's just no shortcut. Daniel says dating should be spontaneous, not found, in my opinion. I think some of the best relationships are spontaneous, where you're out living your life, like you're having fun, because then it's more natural. It's not somebody trying to impress you or trying to morph into being what you want. If you're super into football and playing guitar and you meet somebody else who's super into that, like that's a good fit, because at a minimum, like, okay, we've got some common ground here. It's a better way to start versus, hey, that person's cute, right? Oh my goodness. Walter says, yeah, it really is like an awakening. Yeah. It's, Jennifer says, one of my coworkers is very young, and I can just tell he's being manipulated by his pastor father. I feel so badly for him, but there's nothing I can do to help him. He has to save himself, right? If he mentions something to you, or if he seems open to it, that might be a situation where you could just give him a resource. and just say, and it can be a real brief conversation, and say, I hope this isn't awkward. I just thought I would share this with you. I saw this interesting video on like manipulation or on toxic parents or whatever. And I don't know, just, I thought of you. Like, I thought you might enjoy it, and then just kind of leave it at that. But yeah, trying to, and then Synth mentions, he says, hi, Dana, what's your opinion on those who always give unsolicited advice? On the surface, it appears helpful, but I feel like it's another form of control. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if, like, so like with the coworker, if he's not asking for help or our advice, like it can just, be draining and unwanted if we're jumping in being like, like I can help you. And the gut person's like, I'm fine, I don't need help. But I'm a big fan, because sometimes people need help and they just don't even know. But I think kind of dropping a resource and then just letting go can be a good way. But trying to jump in and fix him and save him and force him into, come into these live streams or watching this, or, that, like, micromanaging him. Yeah, that's a problem. And I think a lot of people that, I think those of us that have been on the other side of this, especially, we feel the sense of urgency because we see it in other people, and we just don't want them to go through what we've gone through. So even if it's coming from a good place, it can be really hard to not give out a bunch of unsolicited advice. So yeah, but yeah, that's, most people are not open to unsolicited advice. It just frustrates us and it annoys them. Like, there's really not a lot that can come from that. But other people in general, if we're not talking, I guess even with us, right? Unsolicited advice in general, but that's something that goes back to like setting the pace, right? So if you've got a friend, somebody in your life who's just coming, like, just micromanaging you and just jumping right in and telling you what you should do, and, well, you need to do this, and you need to make sure you check that and this, that. And it's like, it's okay to just be like, hey, you know what? I got it covered. Like, I appreciate the concern. I've got it. And if they keep at it, oh, well, I just wanted to, and even if it's coming, it doesn't matter what place it's coming from. Like, if it's annoying you, then it just means that you need to set a firmer boundary. So then the next time you reset that boundary with them, it might even be in the same conversation. It would be to say something like, you know what, this is not a conversation that I really want to have, or I appreciate, and you could just depending on the situation and the person, kind of sandwich it. So, because people can get really hurt. Most people don't take constructive criticism well. They don't take setting boundaries well. So kind of couching that in a way. So let's say, for example, you've got a family member who's telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and this, that, and the other, just to be like, you know what? I love you, Mom. I appreciate the concern. I will figure it out, and then I'll keep you posted. Just kind of dodge around that. And then that helps to kind of soften it, versus just shutting it down completely and just saying, I'm done here. Like, this conversation's done. It's just a softer way of doing it. But I don't know. It just depends. It just depends on the person and on the situation. But yeah. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Sarah is, let's see. Sarah says her ex wanted to become a police officer to help the abused children. She said, what a fake. They need this professional mask. Made me wonder if he's not a pedophile. Yeah, it's hard to not wonder stuff like that when you kind of find out, like, ooh, this person is like not who I thought they were, and they have no empathy and remorse and care or concern at all for other people. So let's see here. Let me scroll up. Oh my goodness. Stainless says the domestic violence advocate told us the story of a young lady riding home on a train. She sat by an old woman. The woman offered her a banana because the young lady looked tired. The banana was laced, and she spent the next 8 years being trafficked. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard for normal, decent people to even begin to anticipate all of the different ways that predators operate. I think it just goes back to if something kind of out of the ordinary happens, to just err on the side of caution. That's all any of us can do. I think I'd mentioned before in the one of the live streams when I was in Italy, the pickpockets there are just, I mean, they've got their game down. Like that could be its own reality show. It's just wild, the level of scams that they run. And so like one of them, my uncle had this old Italian woman, like with holding a baby, had hobbled up to him and was speaking in very, very fast, very broken Italian. And he was leaning in to hear her. And that was that level of comfort because she was a woman, she was old, and she was holding a baby. And so she was asking him for something, and I don't know, whatever the conversation was, it was only probably less than a minute long. And then she hobbled along her way. And my uncle then, fast forward a few hours, went to pay for lunch and realized his wallet was gone. And then realized what had happened. And it was just, and probably even still like his understanding of what happened and what really happened are still probably two very different things. But he was thinking that she had the baby and then like a fake arm. So he could see both of her arms, but then had one, or somebody had told him like, oh, that's a scam here. What they do is they have one fake arm, one real arm, and then the other arm goes into your pocket. So, I mean, so when I was in Italy, because the scams, there's just they run such a range. I mean, and it just got to the point where it was like, nobody invades my personal space. Like I kept about 3 feet away from everybody the whole time. Like I didn't talk to men in bars. I didn't carry a lot of money with me. And it's funny because here in the US, we're not used to taking precautions like that. So over there, it was like, okay, if you're going to travel abroad, you're going to be a target. So you've got to plan ahead for this kind of stuff and just realize that you're a target. So not just being aware of like how much jewelry you're wearing and not taking out wads of money, not carrying wads of money in general, things like that. So, because you can't predict all the ways that they have to con you, but you can get that sense of like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like this, I'm feeling like I'm being followed. I was in one tour group in Florence, and it was like at the Duomo or something, like the church in the middle. And there were 3 Italian guys that were about our age. And it was interesting because our tour guide like immediately caught on to them. And so she was talking in English and she's like, I don't want you guys to look. She's talking to the group. It was really interesting. She's like, I don't want you guys to look behind you. But there's 3 younger men that have been following us for a while, and they keep pretending that they're a part of this group. So if you're on like the outside of the group, make sure you've got your wallets put away and your cameras put away and stay with us. And, but they had, I think, ended up following probably 2 older people in the group for kind of a while. It's unnerving when you realize that you're a target. And that's because it was kind of one of those things, like once they have their eye on what they want, like they're not going to stop. So it's hard to shake somebody who's got their eye on your stuff. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. There was a gal, I should say, who did a TED talk a while ago. She was a victim of a horrific violent crime in Paris. Beautiful younger woman, and decided she wanted to be a model. And so she left to go to Paris when she was 18 with, I think, a friend. And she ended up meeting two guys on a train. Maybe it was she met these guys beforehand. Anyways, that they had come across as that they were connected in the modeling agency, and they told her everything that she wanted to hear. And then I won't go into details, but they basically kidnapped her and brutalized her, and her whole story was just kind of coming out on the other side of that, and like dealing with all the embarrassment and the shame and the pain of it all. Just wild. But I mean, like, again, like normal people, you don't go around thinking that somebody's got that on their, mind. Stainless says, I want to believe people are good, but not all. It's just hard to wrap your mind around. Yeah, it is. I totally get you. Sebastian says, not everyone is a narcissist. There are other people that can hurt. The ones that are just in constant escape. What do you mean by constant escape? And I would agree with you. I mean, obviously, not everyone is a narcissist, but I would say that everyone who is problematic is coming from a place of a degree of self-orientation where they're putting themselves first at the destruction of other people. So kind of more of an expansion on the term than either way, it's a problem. But yeah. Mary Ella says, my ex's sister asked me what I've been up to. What should I say? I'm a big fan of anybody that's in their inner circle. Anybody who hurts you, whoever's in their inner circle is not an emotionally safe person for you. And that can seem really harsh, especially to a lot of people that are like quote unquote normal people. They're like, well, I don't want to be judgmental. I don't want to take sides. I mean, that was a long time ago. And maybe it's just perception and all of this kind of stuff. And that's fine. Like, they don't get it. Best case scenario, she doesn't get it. Worst case scenario, she's a flying monkey and she's going to go back and tell him everything that you've said and just stir up the pot. So I think you'll have to kind of figure out how to navigate that line, and you don't need to talk to her. I mean, I don't talk to any of my ex's family at all. Even exes I left, we ended on good terms. There's no benefit to that. I mean, I guess it would be different if you were married and shared children and this kind of thing. But if you don't, then there's no reason. Actually, let's talk about that a little bit. Missouri Cowboy, hello, says, well, this isn't really in response to the comment that you had, but I think it's an important point to bring up. Anyhow, you mentioned the concept of consequences. And so I just wanted to touch on that. A lot of people, myself included, when they start trying to navigate boundaries, is the whole concept of consequences, like deal breakers. They're like, no, I'm assertive. Like, I set my boundaries. They just keep pushing my boundaries. I just keep setting them. They just keep pushing them. The kind of the final step with setting boundaries is having consequences. So if you want to set the boundary, then redraw the boundary. But then if you're continually redrawing it, then you have poor boundaries. This took me many years to realize this. So if you're continually setting a boundary, you're being assertive. If there's no consequence of like, you're distancing yourself basically from them and to whatever degree you need to, then it's what's going on is them continuing to push your boundaries and you continuing to, allow it, basically. Oh, I see. Sebastian says, Dana, about the constant escape. My ex never let me explain myself deeply. It's been 1 year and I cannot see her. She abandoned me for no reason. She was hyperactive 7 out of 7 days, doing activities nonstop. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really valid point. The whole, it's interesting how different kind of unresolved stuff within each of us can come out in different ways. Like if a person's feeling really anxious or insecure or what have you, that can manifest itself in like drinking or drug use or spending money or promiscuity or busyness. I think busyness is something, especially here in the US and probably in other countries where work, I think here we don't have a work ethic. I think it's just more money. But like China, India, where there's this real strong work ethic, countries like that, that level of almost manic level of activity and busyness is really highly valued. It's seen positive, right? Like this, I was watching a documentary. What was it? Maybe it was a YouTube video. I'm pretty sure it's a documentary the other day on Adderall and kind of just kids in college now and people kind of getting into tech fields, like real competitive, like startup companies and stuff like that. And just how abused these uppers like Adderall and Ritalin and these kinds of things really were. And it was just so sad because these kids were like, I've got to be able to compete. I've got to be able to get my grades up. I've got to, everybody's doing it. And if I want to be competitive, then I need to do it too. And that's not a life. It's just this more is not a life, not a life well lived anyhow. And same thing with busyness, but again, like that can really hide itself, especially if people are around a lot of other perfectionist people who are doing a ton of stuff all the time. Just kind of, yeah, something to think about. And Grace says, oh, boundaries without consequences. Boundaries without consequences. Never realized I was doing that until now. No wonder it didn't work. Right? Like that was my realization too. I'm like, oh, I somehow missed that step. I actually thought I had really good boundaries because but here was my thing. Here's my other aha with that. I'm like, but I would bring things up when they got intolerable. It's like, why are you waiting until things get so bad to then start address them? But what it was is I didn't want to make a big deal out of anything. And I had the personality of like, I just want to go along to get along. And I'd been going with the flow my whole life. And so it never dawned on me like that was a problem because it really didn't even feel like a problem. Like I just really didn't have opinions about a lot of things, about food, where we're going to go to eat. I feel like a lot of other people made a lot of decisions for me and I had to just get comfortable with kind of whatever they wanted. And that was a really weird realization. Crazy. And then the kind of the following realization to that was that I was really out of tune with myself in many other ways as well. And I had felt pretty much my whole life like I didn't have a really solid sense of identity. I remember being a teenager or like a tween and looking at different magazines like 16 and different magazines like that. And on the cover, it would have, of course, like that's not even a realistic like expectation, but like seeing different teenage girls. And of course it's a teen magazine, right? So like, and it's so like compartmentalized, like this chick is a rock, like which style are you? Like rocker chick, hippie chick, granola, jock. It was like the Spice Girls. Like you could only be that one thing, right? Like you're either posh Spice or sporty Spice. And like, which one are you? And I felt like I was the only one who just didn't know. I'm like, I don't really know what my style is. And I struggled with kind of knowing who I was for a very long time and didn't realize that that was a problem. But a lot of that stemmed with kind of just going with the flow for such a long time. And what was that book? We read one book in book club. I think it might have been the Respect Me Rules. Or maybe it was the Adeline Birch book on boundaries. Something about the jellyfish in the jar. That haunts me, that image of, if you don't have boundaries and if you're just going with the flow, you're just going to mold into whatever is there. You're like a jellyfish in a jar. And that was just very profound to me. I just did not see that as problematic for a very long time. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Shay says, hey, Shay. Shay says, I totally know what you mean. I was the same way. Yeah, it's weird. And then it kind of makes me wonder if did other people feel that way too? Did everybody feel that way of like, nobody really knew who they were and people were just pretending? Or did people really have it figured out? I don't know. Weird. Sapphire says, Dana, what do you think about attachment theory? Have you or anyone you've known healed from a dysfunctional attachment type to the secure attachment type? That's a great question. I think different attachment styles are a very real thing. So there's secure attachment, there's insecure attachment, like what, anxious avoidant. There might be more types than that. And that kind of stuff is developed pretty young. So I've worked with kids that have had different types of attachment disorders. I don't know. I would be curious to know kind of where they are nowadays. But here's the thing with that. I feel like people, depending, and it's probably on a scale too, right? It's not like it's not so binary, like you're pregnant or you're not, right? Like you have an attachment disorder, but like the degree of it, you could have two kids, for example, that have like reactive attachment disorder. One might be really severe. One might be more like on the mild end of it. So, and that's not something, like degrees of severity is not something with anything in the DSM. So that would be kind of a challenge to even try to classify things on severity, but I think it's important because like there's an ocean of difference between somebody that's more on the mild end and the more, but don't get me wrong, like a problem's still a problem, right? But yeah, like this, it's like depression or anything else. Like you can be mildly depressed or you can be like severely depressed or it's just debilitating. Anyways, so attachment disorder stuff, there's lots of different therapies. If a person can, I think, get into therapy at a young enough age where that stuff can really be worked on, it really can help. But a person, as an adult, if a person has an attachment disorder, it would, depending on, I think how self-aware they are, how much help they really want, these kinds of things would all be like huge determining factors with like developing a healthy attachment style. I think for me, it's what's made it easier for me to effectively bond. That's what we're talking about, like bonding to other people. I had to learn how to keep myself safe. I think that was my biggest barrier to having healthy relationships in general. But my goodness, like if you had a person who had who had trouble attaching anyhow, and then was violated or victimized in some way, like that's really, they're going to go back to, they're going to become more deeply embedded in their attachment disorder because then they can't trust. So then it's this added wall that they've got to somehow get through. So I think it would help people that have attachment disorders to talk about kind of healthy relationships and bonding effectively with people, but how to keep themselves safe, and just kind of what a healthy relationship is and what one isn't. And as I think what tends to happen with people with attachment disorders, I think with pretty much all of us, is if they get tangled up with enough of the wrong kinds of people, like that, those walls, that like insecure attachment style probably would progress into something a lot more severe, to like personality disorder kind of stuff. And, or the anxious avoidant type people would probably just tend to completely withdraw and not connect at all with people, just have major walls up. So I think if you can teach, it's just healthy boundaries is just such a big part of it. And like self-love and helping people to keep themselves safe is just so huge. And if they can learn to love themselves, it makes it so much easier, I think, to learn to love other people if we know how to keep ourselves safe and we're not expecting somebody else's love to like complete us. I think that's been another big lesson for me over the years is now there was a long period in my life where I really felt like I could never attach or bond or love deeply. And then I kind of realized, I think the way I'd been going about it was never healthy to begin with. Like I was confusing those trauma bonds, like that intensity for intimacy. And so that's why I was going around feeling so broken. But now that I don't feel the need to, like I'm not looking to other people, friendships or coworkers or boyfriends or what have you, to complete me. And I don't get in situations anymore, like with friends or with men, where I'm trying to change anybody. Like oh my God, like it's so much easier when you're able just to have that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with people. And you have other people in your life that feel the same way, and you guys can talk about stuff, and there's just more of that healthy connection there, because then they're free to just be themselves, and like you're free to be yourself. And it's a lot easier to just love them from a place of like deep appreciation for who they are, kind of without just expectation, I guess. And I don't mean that in like an unhealthy boundaries kind of way, but like in a just, they are who, like, they're just good, solid people, and you appreciate that about them, I guess. If that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Gigi says, I would bet most of us in this group are somewhere on the spectrum of anxious attachment. Yeah, I would agree. But that's a big part of trauma and PTSD, and it's totally normal. I would be really concerned about anybody who had gone through an abusive relationship, who didn't have, who was still immediately trusting other people, who was able to like immediately date again, who, I would seriously question, like, are they denying what happened? Like, are they just really kind of stuffing this deep down inside? Like, what's going on with them that they're not traumatized by a traumatic event? Like, that's being traumatized by a traumatic event is a totally normal response. So something would be really off if a person was like cool as a cucumber and not impacted in any way, shape, or form. Like, that's disconcerting. And some people, I think, do struggle with, there's just so many lessons to be learned from all of this. But I think another one is really getting in tune with our emotions. I mean, again, most normal people, I think it takes a situation like this to be blown apart when you're starting to reassemble your life brick by brick, piece by piece. You're examining every single piece, like every single emotion that comes up, every friendship, like you're just examining all of it. And hopefully you're building up a life that you're starting to love. But Normal people don't have, and I think this is an incredibly positive thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but normal people don't do this because who wants to rebuild their whole life if they don't have to? So, kind of the benefit of having your life blown apart is you get to question everything and make a conscious decision about so many things, and so many things come to light. Like I was saying about emotions and stuff, and you're probably going to just start realizing like, oh, I didn't realize I was so out of alignment with certain things, and how I felt, or how I even physically felt. It's just so much in all this. Yeah, Lauren says, I'm glad you said that, Dana. Sometimes I do feel bad for being so traumatized after a lifetime of abuse. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's normal to feel this way, but this is where it kind of goes back to like building up a new normal. And that can be such a hard thing to do when it's like, you know what? It feels like I shouldn't have to do this. It's not right. It's not fair. I shouldn't have, like, I already went through all the abuse. Like I shouldn't have to do anything more. Like I don't want to do anything more. And all of that anger and that frustration is equally valid. That's very normal. And then there's the whole process of like grieving the loss of who we were, and if a person's been going through abuse their whole life, that's going to be a series of grieving, of different losses of who you were at different ages. And I think a big part of that coming out on the other side of it, it really does come down to, okay, like I need to create like a kind of a compelling future for myself, something to steer into, something that, yes, all of this stuff happened to me, but I want to be able to somehow use this for my highest and greatest good, and then potentially use it for the highest and greatest good of somebody else. I really feel like doing that helps to transmute all of that pain into something positive and just beautiful. There's just, and even if it's, it doesn't have to even be anything big. It just little things, like holding the door open for another person, giving a person that looks really sad a smile. Just these little things just go so far. Some of the things that helped me the second time around is I had a friend who was going through a divorce, and I used to send him cards periodically because I was really concerned he was going to commit suicide. He was so low. And so it felt so good. And oh my God, I like had so much stuff going on with my own life. I was not in like an emotionally, no stability, like in any way, shape or form in my life at that time. But it felt so good to just send out a card to him to just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. And there's so much that is right about you. Like this too shall pass, and just, keep on keeping on. And just knowing that he wasn't expecting to get a card, but that would probably put a smile on his face. Like that made me feel good, So like little things like that kind of peppered through can, especially when a person has gone through so much, I think that makes us so much more compassionate, or has the potential to make us so much more compassionate for those that are in similar shoes, because we've been there. And it's that level of compassion that just helps, it helps connect people. It really does. Lauren says, I agree. I go back and forth between feeling like I can get through it and be better and have a great life. And other times I feel sad and paralyzed over it. Yeah. And I think that's normal. It's, in Buddhism, Buddha talked about, the whole concept of Buddhism is really rooted in trying to figure out a way to not suffer. And the two things that Buddha figured, and he tried, if you've never heard the story of Buddha, it's a really interesting one. He was a prince who didn't know suffering. He didn't know discomfort even. he lived this very charmed life in a palace. And one day ended up seeing a sick person, a dying man, I think it was, and decided, oh my goodness, what is this? And he wanted to put a stop to it. And so he decided to walk away from his charmed life and figure out, okay, I need to understand like enlightenment, and I need to understand suffering, and how do we get rid of this? And he tried all kinds of things, and he joined all kinds of different groups of different types of monks, and some starved themselves, some meditated all day, they had these different practices, and he wasn't really getting the answers that he was seeking. And so kind of fast forwarding here, but he kind of came to the realization that suffering tends to come from two main causes: clinging and craving. So clinging, we're not living in the present moment. So clinging and craving for what is, or what could be, or what was, or clinging to the past and what was and what could have been and what should have been. And so either way, for clinging to the past or craving for the future, we're not in the moment. And that tends to cause us the greatest amount of suffering. It's oftentimes not even necessarily what happened to us. It's more of how we perceive what happens to us, and like being split back and forth between wanting to go back and wanting to go forward. I thought that's so profound. And I think I would add a third one to that clinging and craving would be comparison. Especially nowadays with social media, it's so easy to look online, and, that's just a terrible, terrible way to do it, because most people aren't living in their truth. They're putting up a bunch of stuff to make themselves, to make their life look a certain way when it's really not that. So I think, kind of with that said, making peace, something that helps me from time to time if I'm really feeling low is I will go watch different videos on getting perspective, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like watching other videos on YouTube of other people's struggles. And my goodness, some people really just go through a heartbreaking amount of stuff. And it's sort of like, oh my goodness, yeah, you know what? Okay, it helps to kind of put our own stuff in perspective, not to minimize it. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes it can almost be comforting. Maybe that sounds terrible. I guess comforting in a way to know that we're just not alone. Everybody's got something. Well, okay, so JJ says, I believe if I just had supportive people around me, I could fly and live in my truth. But I have no one but my narcissists or people who think we are all full of it, or weaklings. But, I will, I'll tell you, that's a big wake-up call. I think that's a big wake-up call that a lot of people tend to have. They tend to find channels like this one because of one relationship in their life, whether it's with a parent or with a significant other or what have you, or a total stranger who, conned them out of something or really hurt them. But they find their way to these types of channels. And then over time, they start realizing, you know what? A lot of people in my life are really toxic. And then that's a really big wake-up call, because it's like, okay, some things need to be shuffled around here. So I need to get some of these toxic people out of my life. I think a very common way that we tend to have toxic people in our life is if we're confusing a person being friendly with them being a friend. I think that's kind of where it starts, especially with friends in your life. So just because a person's friendly, just because you guys hang out, just because you might have some things in common does not make them a friend. A friend is somebody there that has that there's that mutual trust and support. And if that's not there, then they're not a friend. So I think a lot of straightening out our lives starts with understanding how we're defining things to ourselves. Because I hear all the time, I don't even remember where I was. Somebody was talking about, it was some comment on YouTube. There was a high school kid, who was talking about all of his friends were really mean to him, and he was just feeling really alone, and it was just like, then they're not your friends. Like if they're not emotionally safe and there's not that trust and support there, they're not your friends. There might be people that you hang out with, and play video games with or whatnot, but they're not your friends. I think once you can kind of get that clear about that people in your inner circle, that's a space that is earned, not just given. And it's earned with appropriate behavior over an appropriate amount of time. And that you should be choosy about who you let into your circle. So you're letting people in, because I think a lot of us, like if we've known somebody for a long time or they're really friendly, we might have some of the wrong people in our inner circle. We might be like, well, but I've known that person since I was 5 or whatever. But if they're not emotionally safe, or like if there's no longer that connection, then maybe they need to not be in your inner circle, but like a few rings out. Do you see what I'm saying? So kind of changing how you're understanding of people's placement in your life and realizing that that's a thing and that you have full control over that is huge. It's a huge wake-up call. Okay. Lauren says, I don't want to ever have kids around my narcissistic parents. I saw a documentary on lions, and this pregnant lion left this newly formed pack because she knew she could not have her cubs around unstable lions. I think that's wise. It just goes back to understanding behavior, and because in a normal, right, like normal people, it's this idea of family is forever. Those that are in our circle are family. But DNA is not enough of a connection in order to have somebody in your inner circle. Like they've got to be emotionally safe. They've got to for sure be physically safe, especially if you have children or thinking about having children. I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea of, well, but they're family, I'll just tolerate them. And this can be taken to like a crazy degree. They've got a family member that's dangerous and destructive and, a rapist or molester or what have you. And they think, oh, well, they're family. I just got to go along to get along. And they tolerate all kinds of stuff. And then they maybe even have that person around their children thinking like, I don't want to cause waves. Like that is toxic, toxic, toxic. So it's okay to have boundaries and to just make that the new line in the sand. Like my inner circle is emotionally safe and physically safe people, period, end of story. And everybody else is going to be on some sort of outer ring. But, your job as a parent is to keep your cubs safe. And if that means not seeing certain family members or only seeing certain family members in certain contexts, then that's what it means. But I think good for you for trying to navigate that and do what would be best. Yes, I agree. Stainless is talking about abuse is abuse. In domestic violence, we're not allowed to compare. It doesn't matter to what degree anyone has suffered. Suffering is suffering, period. Yes, I agree. I agree with that completely. And I think that's another place that a lot of people, myself included, have tended to get stuck, especially with like emotional or verbal or psychological abuse. They might feel like this is really minimizing to people that have gone through like horrific physical abuse, or if you feel like, okay, I've got PTSD, but this is nothing compared to, somebody who's lived through the Holocaust or, and it can be easy to kind of compare that way. And that's why I think comparison really does lead to a lot of suffering, because then it does tend to minimize stuff. So when I talk about kind of keeping perspective of that everybody's got something and that there is a lot of pain that's out there, that your pain, whatever you went through is very valid. And it's stuff that you're going through. And just because somebody else might have gone through something more doesn't make your hurt any less or any less valid. Okay, let me scroll up here. Let's see. Jennifer asks, how can you form emotionally safe bonds with people when a lot of healthy people don't form bonds with unhealthy people? Well, are you talking about us being unhealthy? I think that's how I'm reading that. If you are, I will tell you, the more, actually, let me wait. Let me wait and see what you have to say to that. Is that what you're talking about, Jennifer? Hold on, let me scroll up. Okay, I don't know if she's still here or if the screen's frozen or what. Oh, there she is. Gotcha. Okay, that's what I thought you meant. I just didn't want to put words in your mouth. She said, I mean, codependency being unhealthy in a way. Absolutely. Very insightful question and comment, and I agree 100%. So here's the thing. What is a healthy person? Right? Like I was saying, I really fully believe healthy exists on the other side of the fire. It's when you rise again as that phoenix, that's when you're healthy. So we're not talking about normal, we're talking about healthy. And healthy people have a set of healthy behaviors. And the good news with healthy is it's because it is a set of healthy behaviors. It has nothing to do with what happened to us or who we were 6 weeks ago. It's it's like once you start down that path of healthy and you start you're working on like your boundaries, your standards, your ability to trust, and kind of appropriate levels of conversation and sharing and oversharing and kind of navigating all of this stuff and like what you really have control over, which is just ourselves. And you know what I mean? Like you're and it takes a little while. It's going to take practice. It's just like any other skill that we learn. As you're refining, you will find, I would be curious if people have experienced anything other than this. I think what most people tend to find is because there's so much personal growth that can come from this. And once your eyes are open to so much of this, it's just like boom, 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 boom. Like you just start having all of these aha moments and like the things just start clicking, you know? And it's kind of just game changer after game changer after game changer after game changer. And so you're going to just be leveling up quickly. And the more in any time in life, anytime that there's change in our life, whether it's a profession, whether it's you're moving to another state, you're learning another language, like especially with something like this, your whole life's blown apart and you're reassembling things. Whenever there's change like that, we just start kind of connecting with other people that tend to have similar stuff going on. So like if you're studying guitar, you're probably going to start hanging out with other people that are learning how to play guitar. If you're really interested in like personal growth and like boundaries and you know, all of like this, there's so much like amazingness in this that normal people tend to not necessarily seek out. That once you start doing it, you're going to find a bunch, you have the potential to find a bunch of other people that are really like growth oriented and focused on self-esteem and understanding, you know, self-awareness and just all kinds of things. And it's, you know, you're practicing these skills, like they're practicing these skills and so on. So. Stainless asks, what constitutes normal? Well, that's a sticky question because it really depends, right? I think tends to be two types of normal. You've got functionally dysfunctional, and then I think you have destructively dysfunctional normal. So normal is kind of just what people have been doing. So if you grew up in a home where everybody was an alcoholic, or everybody yelled, or no one talked, or do you see what I'm saying? Like normal is just kind of whatever we're used to. And that tends to just be different varying degrees of dysfunction. Healthy, I think maybe that's getting clarity on that is a better, like gives us more clarity to like what to steer into. Healthy is it's just like healthy food. Like it's nourishing, it's energizing, it's healthy people tend to feel empowering. It's healthy communication, which I talk about all the time, like the open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. But everything, healthy people, boundaries, standards, deal breakers. So for example, oh gosh, sorry, hold on. So some of my deal breakers are abuse of any kind, active addictions, especially if, really active addictions in general. Like it's just, I don't want I don't want a project. Like I want somebody to have that stuff kind of figured out. So no abuse, no addictions, abuse, addiction, adultery. So like cheating of any kind, and a rotten attitude. Like don't want that. Don't want to come home to somebody who's always, doom and gloom, or, hates their job, or is just constantly negative, or who's trying to drag me down, telling me all the reasons why I couldn't or shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So those are some of my major deal. I should add to that list under attitude, and perpetually confusing, or crazy making, mental anguish inducing, none of that stuff, like done. And at first, if you kind of set that as like your new normal, it can be really scary. Like, oh my goodness, then there'd be nobody left in my life. But I think what you'll find as you go through, because you're going to be probably meeting new people and learning to kind of set some boundaries and assert yourself with the old people, there's just kind of this great reshuffling that's going to occur within your life. And, it's sort of like, and it can be really hard at first, and it can be kind of lonely, where it's like, man, I really feel like I had to just kind of clean out the fridge basically, and now there's nothing in here. But if all that was in the fridge was a bunch of toxic food, then there wasn't anything to nourish you to begin with. So it's hard to let go, because oftentimes toxic people, it's this like false sense of security of like, well, but they're my quote unquote friend, or their quote unquote family. But it's like, if they're not emotionally safe and there's no mutual sense of trust and support, it's a one-sided relationship, like nobody's really there. And until we're going to suffer until we see that that's indeed the case. And then we have to kind of figure out how to navigate that. Like, okay, they're not going to be in my inner circle, but then what does it look like for them to be in like one ring or two rings or five rings out? Like, what is that going to mean to you? Missouri Cowboy says, isn't a codependent not in recovery unsafe, as they pick a project to fix? So they believe and act on the belief that they have the right and are entitled to control others. Yes. I think so much of the stuff starts with awareness of boundaries and what we have control over, and being assertive. So even if we were friends with a person who was on that codependent side of things, and they were trying to micromanage stuff and trying to fix us and give us a bunch of solutions to problems that we're not open to unwanted advice. If we have that boundary and we can set that in like, however way we feel fit. I mean, I'm a big fan of like the whole sandwich approach of like starting something off, letting a person know, like, I can tell how much you care about this, but, I'm working on a solution and I will keep you posted. Or I appreciate the concern, but, I just need a break. I just don't, I feel like let's switch to a different topic. Something like that. It just kind of helps that. But codependent recovery, I mean, that kind of stuff, I think it just depends on what kind of stuff is out there. I mean, I think a person can spend their whole life in therapy or a coda group and it may not go very far. It's just shooting for the highest level of healthy, because we're not going to nobody starts out at the finish line, right? It's going to be a series of trial and error, and it's all part of our growth. So it's totally, where you are right now is okay. Like, it's okay. Like, you just have to trust the process and practice. Like, you just keep moving forward. And if things, it's the whole thing, like you'll either win or you'll learn. And when you learn, it's like, okay, re-examining of kind of what could we have done different and all of this kind of stuff. So okay, let's see here. Oh, Namal, hi. He says, hi, Dana. I heard there was a fire at your home. Are you okay? We are okay now. So yeah, the house is, I haven't been over there in probably, I don't know, a week or two. But yeah, what's crazy is just the level of smoke. The smoke damage was so severe. So getting a whole new kitchen, a whole new bathroom, a whole new floor downstairs, probably a whole new floor upstairs. I mean, they're basically gutting the whole house. But yes, thankfully I got out in time, and miraculously the cats survived it. That's such a shocker. But yeah, we're good. We're good. But thank you for asking. Jennifer, you just are so full of good questions. Okay, gosh, that's a good one. She says, how do you gain the self-esteem it takes to become more successful work-wise than just surviving in a dead-end job that you hate but can't leave? I guess I would try to figure out kind of what limiting belief you have that's keeping you stuck, and what would be a job that you would like. So sometimes it can help too to see other people that are in that profession that you want to be in. I think actually that can be really helpful, because then it's sort of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe like that person, like just meet, and I don't mean it in like a bad way, but like meeting a wide range of people that are in a certain profession. Because if we have low self-esteem, we might, or even a skewed perspective of like what it takes to get into a certain field, we might walk around thinking like, oh, there's no way I could ever, do X, Y, Z. And then we meet other people that are in that field and we're like, man, if they could have done it, I could have done it. So I think that's a big part of it. And just examining what limiting belief you have, because really, like, why not you? Why not now? There was a quote I read years ago that really, really resonated with me. And it was something along the lines of, like, I feel sorry for the man who knows more about his weaknesses than he does his strengths. And that's obviously, that pertains to men or women, but that just really resonated with me. And how many of us, especially those of us that have struggled with self-esteem kind of stuff our whole life, have walked around like, hey man, I know so many things that are wrong with me, right? Like I know all of the ways that I need to improve, but we're out of tune with everything that is right about us, or everything that we do have in our corner. So it is worth doing some exploration and trying to figure out, like, okay, what are your strengths and why? So like, really, why not you? You know, it'd be different if the dream was like really far out there. If you're like, okay, well, yeah, I'm 22 and I want to be a prima ballerina. Like, well, okay, they probably missed the window, right? Like, you needed to start taking lessons when you were 3. But like, outside of kind of extreme stuff, getting a better job or getting a job that you love, other people do it all the time. So maybe even taking a few steps to see like what would just be involved with that. Like, where is the fear? Is the fear with like writing a resume, or is it with possibly going back to school, or is it with feeling, that you just somehow couldn't measure up? She says, yeah, I get that. She says, okay, I think that's part of it. It's hard for me to visualize anything I'd be good at. Anything I'd be good at than what I do or similar things. But I've realized I'm not a people person, and it's just so draining. Not that I hate people, it's just not my thing. Well, and if you're more on like the introvert side of things, being around people all day long can be incredibly draining. Customer service in general is really draining, even if you do like people. So that, oh, honey, no, you don't. She said, I guess I have way more that's wrong with me than right with me. I guarantee you that is not the case. I guarantee you that is not the case. So think about maybe make a list of, and it can be weird if we're not used to, if we feel like, oh, that's bragging or that's arrogant or what have you. Some of your accomplishments in life, even if those accomplishments are you quit smoking, or you learned how to knit, or you tried out for the softball team in 7th grade, even if you didn't make it, but you still tried out. Certain things that you did and certain character traits about you that you like about you. Maybe that's that you're really determined, or that you're compassionate, or that you really do care about certain things. Like maybe you're really into animals, or you're really into people. Like, I really care about people, or you're organized, or what have you. And just start making a list of, this is what makes you, you, and this is everything that is good and right about you. Because there is a lot that's good and right about you. And as far as like finding a job goes, I don't know how old you are. Just by your picture, you look young. But I will tell you, it takes a while to kind of figure that stuff out. I think there's a handful of people that tend to know, like they graduate from high school, and so I've got this stray hair somewhere here. Okay. Some people graduate from high school and they just know. They're like, yep, that's it. I'm going to be a firefighter. Done. Or I'm going to be a special ed teacher. Done. And that's what it is. And they do that for the next 40 years. A lot of other people, it's a lot of exploration and figuring out what the good news is with jobs that you don't like. The benefit of that is contrast. So then you can figure out, okay, you know what? These are the things that I don't like. Like, I don't like customer service. I don't like, and it can feel negative, right? Listing out everything that you don't like, but we're using it for a positive reason. So you just got to go with it. I don't like punching a clock. I don't like working in a cubicle. So then you flip it. Okay, well, that probably means that you would like a job with more of a flexible schedule, a job that doesn't have a lot of walls, or maybe that you're outside, a job that's maybe like less hands-on with, maybe you're dealing more with like inventory or animals, or just not in a direct customer service position. kind of stuff. And then it's okay. It's okay to kind of sample different jobs and figure out. And each time you do anything, you're going to get feedback. You're going to, not even from other people, but like just from that experience. You're like, this is what worked and this didn't work. And oh my goodness, okay, these are the lessons that I learned from that. And then you can use that and apply it and then go and do the next thing. And the more that you do that, the more clarity you'll get. I love that. Yeah. Stainless says, my therapist says, when you remove the trauma, people tend to bloom. Yes. I think that's true in so many ways. So many ways. In that, Jennifer, I totally get it. She says, everything I think to do, I always overthink it. And then the cons of that position outweigh the pros. And then I'm back to not trying anymore. And maybe a thought would be to just take the pressure off of yourself. I think, to me, it sounds like you're thinking about it in terms of, I need to pick once and make sure I have the right choice. And then, because that's it. And that's very, that's oftentimes not the case at all. So many things are just kind of trial and error. So maybe it is, maybe you decide, you know what, the next year, I'm just going to try to take, a variety of jobs, or maybe you decide to, or maybe another way to do it would be to go talk to people in a variety of fields that are doing what you think that you might want to do and get a feel for it. That was one of I think the best things about nursing was we had clinicals like right away. So people that didn't like nursing, that washed you out pretty quick. And then you also knew like pretty quickly, certain areas of nursing were just not for you. Like I was not a fan of emergency room kind of stuff. I loved psychiatric nursing. I loved hospice. So you learn by doing, I guess is what I'm saying. And if you can talk to other people or spend the day with them, like in their profession, just kind of seeing like what they do and asking them questions and all of that thing, it can give you a much fuller picture of kind of what that's about. And then, you can kind of go from there. But yeah, it's something a lot of people struggle with. She says, another thing is that I'm about to be there for 15 years next month. My goodness, how old are you? You don't look older than 20. My goodness. She says, so finding a job I'm qualified for that's less draining is hard because I'm at the top out rate, even though I still make under a living wage. Yeah, I would say to start writing stuff down. One of the things that I did when I went through, I guess it was the end of my relationship with Jack. My ex-husband and I, he was military. We moved around a lot. And it got to the point where I had no traction in my own life. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had tried all kinds of different professions, but we kept moving. So like I couldn't get traction. And then no place was home. And talk about feeling lost. Like I just really did not know where to go or what to do or any of that. And I sat down one day and I just started making a list of where I wanted to live. And, I put down, like, I really want a place without a lot of highways because traffic gives me anxiety. I wanted a place that had some lakes, had all 4 seasons. And I just started making this list of everything that came to my mind. Like I like a lot of mom and pop kind of places, nothing super crowded, place where I can, go camping and people that are more laid back, that, bonfires on weekends, that kind of thing. And I realized, I'm like, I think this place exists in Michigan. And then I set out to go find it, and I did. So sometimes it's just making that list of getting clarity on like, okay, you're in the position, even though it sucks that you're making under a living wage, the benefit to that is that you don't have kind of this golden handcuffs to your job. So it's a lot harder to quit a job when a person's making, 100, 6 figures plus a year, where they're like, I hate this job, but I've got the mortgage and the debt and the expectations and the lifestyle I'm used to. I can't just quit. So that's kind of what you've got in your corner of, you could quit, probably find a job close in pay without a lot of difficulty, and find a job close in pay that you enjoy. But I would encourage you, start making a list. It's amazing the stuff that'll surface when you start doing that. So I don't know. Different people kind of step into their own at different points in their life. And I was still very lost at 30. So I was starting to get it more figured out at 35. I'm 40 now. I'll be 41 next month. And, it's just, we all do the best that we can do. And I don't know. It was like, for me, I needed all of those experiences to help define what I was looking for. I just didn't have that clarity. But, just that was the path that I had to take. And I think everybody's got their own path, and it's okay. It's okay if you don't have all the answers. I think some of the most interesting people out there still don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and they're 75. Colonel Sanders didn't start KFC until he was in his late 60s. So, it's just, life is a lot longer than I think we realize. Okay. So with that said, let's wind down and do our guided meditation thing for tonight. So if you have a chance, get comfortable. And Jennifer, let's continue this conversation either a little bit tomorrow for book club or next week, because I think it's one that a lot of people struggle with. Okay, so yeah, we're going to be over on time, but go ahead and get comfortable, and whatever that might be for you. And let's take some deep breaths. So let's do 7. So deep breath in through your nose. And out through your mouth. And really making it a point to turn inward and feel each breath as your lungs expand. Just allowing yourself to be still and silent. Tuning in to the sound of your beating heart. Just being fully present in this moment and in your body. And realizing that in this very moment that you are safe and you are here, and it is okay to relax and be fully present. Allowing yourself to set down any anxiety, fear, or heaviness that you might be carrying from the past week or even longer. That it's okay to just set that down. And when we're done, you can choose to pick it back up again if you'd like. Or you can just leave it over in the corner. And if you want to come back and unpack it or pick it up or do whatever you want, you know that it's there and that it's okay. And just because you're not carrying it around with you doesn't mean that what happened to you is okay. Doesn't mean that you're okay with things. Doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's okay to put it down. It's okay to put it down. You know exactly where it is. Just notice how you feel after putting that stuff down. That it's okay to feel kind of vulnerable, or you might feel really light, not realizing how heavy a lot of that stuff really was that you carry around every single day. Feeling yourself without holding on to that. And it's okay if you're feeling maybe scared or a little confused, like that's normal. Just allowing yourself to feel the difference, to just have that stuff set down and feel the lightness of who you really are underneath all that. Now bringing your attention to the top of your head, just slowly and progressively just relax every muscle group there is. So relaxing your forehead, relaxing your eyebrows, relaxing your eyes, letting your eyes just kind of go soft, noticing if that's a place that you might store some tension. Noticing how it feels when you just allow that area to completely relax. Relaxing your cheeks and your mouth. Noticing if you've been clenching, kind of pursing your lips or clenching your jaw. And just letting that go. Letting your jaw fall open. Releasing your tongue from the roof of your mouth. Relaxing your neck, your shoulders, letting them drop down. Really feel the weight of what relaxed shoulders feel like. And if you're on a bed or a chair, kind of rolling your shoulders back, just opening up your rib cage, realizing that you're safe and that it's okay. Relaxing your chest, your stomach, your shoulders, your arms, your hands. Letting your arms and your hands fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Relaxing your hips and allowing your legs to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. And continuing to breathe. Relaxing your thighs and your knees, your calves, and your feet, and your toes, and allowing your feet to fall in whatever position is the most comfortable. Feeling the heaviness of your body, how good it feels just to be relaxed. Continuing to be here in this moment, knowing that you are safe, that you are okay, that you are strong, that you are wise, that there is so much right with you. And continuing to breathe. And again, turning your attention inward, listening to your heartbeat. Just be fully present in your body. And now let's do another 7 breaths. Each breath in, visualize perhaps some sort of cleansing, restorative light. Maybe it's silver, maybe it's white, maybe it's just sparkly. As you breathe that in, allowing that restorative light to just swish and swirl all its way through your body, around every single cell, as it moves effortlessly and easily and almost playfully throughout your whole body. And with each exhale, exhaling, visualize any residual stress, anxiety, or tension leaving your body. You might want to visualize it as some sort of cloudy color, or as a cloud in general, some sort of shade of gray, like an exhaust from a car. So with each breath in, with that wonderful, healing, restorative light, and then exhaling any residual anxiety, stress, tension. Noticing that with each breath in and each exhale out, that exhale breath is becoming lighter and lighter, as that restorative energy is doing its work. It's moving its way through your whole body, repairing and restoring, getting you centered and grounded with everything good and right in the world and with yourself. Once you feel connected to everything good and right within yourself and within the world, go ahead and send some of that positive energy back out into the world, perhaps to other people here in the chat tonight, or anyone else that you're feeling could benefit from some positive energy. Just giving them a big energetic hug. It's out of a place of deep appreciation. And acknowledging all that is good and right about them. Or perhaps taking some time and just focusing on everything that is good and right in your life right now. There's so many things that we are so kind of quick to take for granted. But acknowledging them, a nice hot shower, comfortable bed, the internet. So many things, the quality people that might be in your life, the awareness that you do have. So many things are right with your life. The health that you do have. So many things. And when you're ready, come on back. And before you open your eyes, take a moment and just give yourself a really big, energetic hug. Just acknowledging just how far you've come and that there are just so many things that are right about you. There really, really are. And you're doing a great job. You've come so far. You are just amazing. Just amazing. You have a lot to be proud of. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Oh, thank you, Missouri Cowboy, for the live stream donation. He says, thank you, Dana, for all you do for us and providing a safe space to tell our stories and share information, insights, and experiences. You are so very welcome. So I would challenge you guys for this next week. Well, we're doing book club tomorrow, so don't forget about that. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about my book, Out of the Fog, and I'm going to be sharing what I would hope would be 7 of the more important takeaways from the book. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow night, and if not, then we'll see you next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I would encourage you, if you're looking for a project, to start making a list. Make a list of everything that is right about you. So I hope you guys will take me up on that challenge. I'll be curious to hear kind of what your experience is with making a list and what you discovered about yourself. So have a wonderful night, you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So just big hugs to all of you guys, and I will see you tomorrow night. Have a good one.